Welcome everybody to the Mana Trader series. For you eagle-eyed people out there, I am not Koi Barmeister. My name is Will Hall, better known as the Will Hall EXP on the internet. And that's not Ross Miriam. That is the one and only phenomenal control player, Kanister MTG. And we're going to be taking you through the Mana Trader series this weekend, which is Modern, my favorite format. How are you doing today, Kanister?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Will. We're going to take a look first at the metagame breakdown,
Yeah, let's have a
seeing
look.
what players have brought to the table for this tournament.
Let's have a little look. Obviously, we've got 139 players this weekend, and this is the decks that they've decided to bring. The most popular, both at the top there, Rhinos and Creativity. Are you kind of expecting that sort of meta here, or is that a bit of a shock?
Certainly, that's around what you should expect, and probably what most of the players expected going into the field. Creativity has been a consistent performer, consistent top deck at all levels of play in Modern, really. Rhinos also following it close by, so not a surprise to see both decks at the highest representation in this tournament.
Yeah, I like Creativity. There's a lot of different ways to play Creativity as well, right? There's the Jund versions, the 4-5 color versions, access to a lot of decks, things like Leyline Bindings really helping these decks move forward. And I think that's why you see a lot of players move towards these. It's very hard to also play against or hate out in certain instances. But then talking about hating out, is it Murktide? Now, this has obviously been the bugbear of the format for a long time, one of the most sustained decks we've had for a long period. A lot of Modern Horizon 2 cards in here. This, we've so spoke about this deck so much, so I think we should probably just skip that one, go straight to Rakdos mid-range. Tell me some of the power of this deck.
Yeah, Rakdos mid-range, this is going to be the deck centered around the Evoke Elementals, Fury and Grief, and also the combat tricks that allow them to be reanimated on turn 1 for the double enters the battlefield trigger and a huge body to threaten your opponent. It's certainly a force to be reckoned with. I've heard some varying opinions about how well this deck positions itself against Creativity specifically, so not a surprise to see like the mid-range decks of the format, because that's what they are. Rakdos, both Rakdos and Izzet are basically like the most Jund-like, Jund mid-range-like decks of the format, trailing a little bit behind, but still pretty good representation behind the Rhinos and Creativity decks.
Well, where there's mid-range decks, there's always going to have to be an aggro deck, and we do have Hammer Time in the format. Obviously, it's not Infect, but it's as close as I can get to Infect, so I'll take it. Super fast, super explosive. We've seen a lot of players like kind of pick this up, kind of meta dependent, because it's in the day you used to have a good like is it Murktide matchup, right? Burn damage doesn't really work too well when you're making your creatures have an extra 10 toughness or so.
Yeah, that was certainly one of the big draws to the Hammer deck when Is it Murktide was the top dog, let's say. Nowadays, Murktide has fallen a little bit, and it's rarely the most popular deck in a tournament, so reasons to play Hammer are a little bit diminished, but still Hammer is a great deck, and certainly a deck that rewards mastery and being used to its play patterns. It's a deck that has a lot of cheap cards, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of ways to approach games, and it certainly rewards players who are willing to put in the time.
Yeah, I think that's just Modern in general, right? If you can learn a deck and become a master of it, your percentage points of winning just dramatically rise, because you know when you need to be the aggro player, the control player, what your game plan is, and also how to utilize your sideboard more. One that comes quite around is with Living End, using the graveyard. We used to see it in the old Jund colors. We've now moved away from that, and it's more the free color sort of era of cycling our things and bringing them back with the cascade spells at instant speed now. What do you think about this deck?
Well, Living End certainly a very powerful option. For a long time, I considered Living End to be like basically a better version of Rhinos, but I think by now time has proven us that Rhinos, with its higher amount of interaction and stability, and I guess less vulnerabilities, just made Rhinos the cascade deck of choice for most players. Living End is a more powerful, but also strangely less consistent option, being just vulnerable to not only all the cascade hate like the Fairy, Time Raveler, or Charles of the Void, but also just to plain old graveyard hate being a problem for it.
Yeah, like you don't really turn up to a Modern tournament without graveyard hate, and this one obviously catches a lot of that up, especially with things like endurance now in the format and multiple cards being able to cast it. or not cast it for free, basically. But that's page 1. Let's see what we got on page 2. What the rest of the field managed to bring. 4-color Omnath. We've seen the Yorion builds. Yorion got banned. This deck's still floating around. Couple of different ways to build it. Talk us between like the 4 or 5 colors. What's the differences we can see in these?
Ever since Yorion got banned, there has really been no consensus on how to approach the Omnath decks. We've seen the Keruga versions, just like the version that Respect the Cat was able to take down the Prague tournament with a few months ago. There's people who just omit companions entirely nowadays with some more powerful options that do not fit with, for example, Kahira. Eleshnorn comes to mind. There is versions that center more so around elementals. There is versions that are just basically control decks with counterspell in it. There is lots of variance and no consensus. One of the interesting new cards that the Omnath decks have been picking up though is Nissa, Resurgent Animus from Much of the Machine Aftermath. Certainly an interesting option and one that has many upsides over other card advantage engines previously used in its place. So it's gonna be
pretty powerful card advantage. We've seen that, and obviously it's in one of these like the new sets that was like an add-on set, but potentially we're going to see quite a lot of that card cast if we get the Omnath decks on. We're going to move down to hardened scales. So I'm old, let's be honest. I'm an old guy. I remember old school Affinity. Scales is basically the new updated shiny new version of that deck. A lot of math involved. If we end up casting that one, I'm definitely passing a lot on to you because it hurts my brain. I told you I'm an infect player. I count to 10 and that's it. This one's once you start getting hardened scales, that starts going crazy, right? Can you just get win out of nowhere?
Yeah, the saying goes that like once you have to do math in hardened scales, you probably just won. So that could be a decent shortcut, a good heuristic to go by. Of course, in practice, tough situation will come up, and there is certainly a lot of things to consider. Archbound Ravager is a hell of a card. There's so much things you can do with it. There's just so many options and so many things that you have to keep in mind. So certainly not a deck for the faint of heart. You need to bring your A game when you're playing it, and you need to keep your focus on. But also, this deck is also another deck that just got powered up by the most recent set, or I guess just the main March of the Machine set. Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, I believe, finally gave this deck some redundancy. So it gave this deck a little bit of redundancy on its main crucial hardened scales effect. So scales are having a little bit of a resurgence thanks to that. We have
another
not
deck
been
that like
seeing
rewards you for mastering, right? If you master that deck, as we've said, like you master that deck, it's so hard to play against because you've got to basically work out their turn for them while they're working out their turn. So you've got to be good. So very hard to play against. Can be kind of easy to hate out occasionally because it does suffer from the enchantment artifact kind of hate that floats around in the format. But next deck, Yawgmoth. Okay, this is my deck. This is my modern deck of choice if I go to paper tournaments. I love this deck. I love everything about it. Creature combo deck. What have you got to say on this one?
Yawgmoth is awesome. Like I agree with you. Like you say, you like it a lot. It's kind of admirable and adorable how like Yawgmoth combines like the least amount of actually standalone good cards into a deck that's cohesive and potent.
You're saying Young Wolf's not stable in the modern metagame? Is that what you're saying?
No, not quite, not quite. But certainly a dangerous deck to play against, and similar vibes that Archbound Ravager can provide for their opponents when you're playing hardened scales. It can be similarly tough when you're facing down a Yawgmoth surrounded by a few creatures. So your opponent can just respawn by sacrificing their undying creatures and get a lot of value. So you have to be playing really, really carefully around that.
Sweet. Okay, the next one, generic Ragavan. I don't think that's the what that deck is, but that's what we've put in. We think that's the breach deck. Is that correct?
That's the most common way I've seen it labeled, yeah. The generic Ragavan decks typically mean the Underworld Breach combo decks, oftentimes including Grinding Station, Mox Amber combo, but not always. Sometimes it's just Underworld Breach with Dragon Rage's Channeler, Lightning Bolts, like the short combo version, let's say.
Love to see it. And then finishing off, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is Burn and Mill, not Mill and Burn combined in one deck. 'Cause if it is, I think that should be the feature match. But Mill, we kind of know what it does what it says on the tin. Burn, we've all played Magic, right? It's kind of the go-to deck when you first get into a format. Quite easy, cheap to pick it up, and it's also still stood the test of time. Still a really good deck if your players do not bring the right cards for that meta. And then we've got like 30 other sort of decks just floating around there. We'll a few one-overs. We'll be able to see that. The game will get posted after round 1, I believe, that you guys can see. So let's move on to players to watch. Who have we got playing in this tournament this weekend? Obviously, these are going off their MTGO names. So any names on there stand out for you?
Yeah, Levunga 21, also known as Matias Leverato, my good friend, choosing Living End as his weapon of choice is certainly a nice deck to tackle the tournament with. Happy Sandwich is known from dominating countless modern challenges, top 8s, just over and over. You can see Happy Sandwich getting there with Hammer Time. That's just a deck that Happy Sandwich always plays, and certainly is displaying a level of mastery with it.
Obviously got Phil Hellman there. That's one of my friends, Sam Ralph. He's obviously qualified for Worlds this year. He won Arena Championships 1. He loves his kind of scam Rakdos deck, seeing him play it quite a lot around the world, all the events that I've been to as well. So he does that. Ex-Whale, popular MTGO streamer, very big character on Twitter. Decided to go with Jesco Breach.
One of the recent mocks, not the most recent one, but there was that mocks that Ex-Whale was able to win with red-green Valakut metagaming, like in a very nice way against a field of 3 or 4 Bjorn players at the time. That was pretty impressive. Today we see him choosing Jeskai Breach as his weapon of choice. It is unclear if it's the Grinding Station version or if it's the short combo version or the more mid-range version. Certainly going to be exciting to see.
Moving down the list there, one name that sticks out to me there is Doomwake, popular streamer, very big in the Magic community right now, deciding to go with the metagame favorite, Rhinos. So we'll see how he gets on. And a couple other streamers they've got Twinless, and we've got Islands Go Sam. So from that one, let's see what they're playing for this weekend. We've got all these players this weekend, 139. What are they playing for? What are the prizes that is going to happen? Let's see if we can get that one on the screen for you all. Shout out to Adrian in the background doing all this. One-man band putting on the show. Here we are. So this weekend, they managed to get to the Swiss portion. There it is on our screen. If you come in first place, you will get yourself $300. The best bit about that, though, if you have a Mana Trader subscription, you get a 10 times bonus. You get $3,000. Working our way down to top 32, where you're going to get yourself some Mana Traders credit there, depending if you've got a subscription or not. But the big thing everyone's going to be playing for, and we're going to talk about it a bit later on, is the December finals. That is a $25,000 tournament. If you finish first or second in this Swiss weekend, you will get an automatic qualification to that. So let's go to the match on the table. So we do have a bounty this weekend, which we'll talk about after this round, because unfortunately they got the bye. So we'll talk about it later on. Looks like we have got 2 players here. I'm going to go on. Okay, we're just getting the decks up for you. Okay, so it does look like we have Living End at the top of your screen. And
you see Levunga on top of the screen going with Living End with a pretty reasonable hand. Yeah, lots of cyclers. Facing off against Ketria Tryon.
Gabriel 86, is it? So one thing here on the Living End side, so it looks to me, I play a lot of this deck. I really do enjoy this deck. I think it's great. We've got a lot of ways to fill up our graveyard here, but we've also got the instant speed way to cast our Cascader with Force Negation backup if we need it. Very super strong, powerful part about this deck, right?
Yeah, Levunga's hand is almost perfect. Basically, the only thing it's missing so far is the green source, which most likely he's gonna be able to find no problem between Street Raves, Curator, Waker of Waves. There's so many cyclers, and the one extra tool that Levunga is looking for is just Grief, helping him clear the way from any counter magic or any problematic cards that might otherwise impede his plan. So we see that Gabriel86 is playing Rhinos. Traditionally,
Yep.
in the Cascade face-off, Living End is the more favored side. The Cascade spells from Living End are just much more threatening and much more powerful. There is just a different level, right?
Yeah, we get to
Rhinos
like
do
use it as a
powerful.
board sweep almost. So we can let
Yeah,
them
yeah.
go off on the other side of the battlefield. We can let them put some rhinos on. We cast. Not only do we raft the rhinos away, we also get to replenish with creatures. I think it's going to get a bit different after sideboard because this game's very tricky. Who's going to pull the trigger first? But we'll see how that turns out from both of us. We're just passing the turn back. Cycling obviously can be done at instant speed here, and potentially on the other side, if they just cascade into another rhinos, we could use the force negation if we need to. It's very much who's going to break serve first here, right?
In a way, but also at the same time, the interesting quality of Force of Negation is that it can be cast for free, but only during your opponent's turn.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that if you go for a violent outburst during your opponent's turn, you can use your force to protect your violent outburst, but they cannot. So really, it's pretty hard to actually stop Living End from resolving for a long time in game one. So I think Levunga is going to be hugely favored this game. Like all he needs to do is just cast a violent outburst with a force of negation backup before Gabriel's gonna have access to 6 mana, and that's actually almost guaranteed resolution of Living End.
So what we've seen Rhinos, they play Mystical Dispute in the main now. They kind of move more that way, playing 4 of them in the main. Do you like that move? Why have they been all of a sudden bringing this sideboard card and playing it in the main deck?
Uh, it's a good move. I think it's a good move. Yeah, I think it just it's pretty right for them. If you look at the metagame, like we just did look at the metagame breakdown, there is certainly more decks that are weak to Mystical Dispute, where Mystical Dispute is a card that's excellent, compared to decks where other options like Fury shine. So, if you just play matchups where Counter Magic is better than Fury, then understandably you're going to be interested in switching to playing more stack-based interaction rather than creature removal. So I like that move from Rhinos.
Okay, so here's an interesting. We do have a land drop. We've got a fiery Is it if we want to use that for the turn, but are we going to try and cycle for a green source here? Or is it not really worth doing it? We're just going to play our land, try and hit a green source for next turn so we can go off through potentially grief and a force negation.
It makes sense to cycle a Street Rave. First thing, yeah, first thing first. You can just try to find a green source. We see Gabriel going for a Cascade spell after
Mm-hmm.
Levunga conspicuously moved to his second main phase without doing anything. And the cycle of Street Rave prompts Gabriel to cast a Violent Outburst into Crushing Footfalls, which is an interesting play.
I was about to say, why would we be doing it now? Why are we doing it in response to the cycle of a street wave? Was it just why we think the shields are down? No third land drop's been hit. It looks like they're trying to hit their third land drop. So potentially, even if they do have the, some sort of counter magic here, they can't cast it.
I struggle to come up with like a very rational way to take much information from the Street Race cycle, but certainly you would like to resolve your Rhinos now, and perhaps if you have Force of Negations, then you could try to use them to protect yourself from the Cascade spell from Levunga's side. You don't, in Gabriel's position, you don't know if there is a Force of Negation or even a Violent Outburst, which is the combination that is required to beat a Force of Negation in Gabriel's sense. So of course you just cast your Rhinos because you do have to clock Levunga somehow, and you do have to play to the board as soon as possible.
So it doesn't look like we managed to draw a green source, just a Charlotte's Agent drawn off that cycle. Do you have the options
Yeah,
for a land drop? Can cycle if we need to. I don't think grief's kind of the option we want to go with right now. We kind of want to use that as a way to clear the path, as you were speaking about. Are we just playing land and passing
there's
here?
another black card. There's another black card in hand still, right? The Architects of Will. So we could still cycle the Street Rave. Take a look at another card, because I think finding the green source here is very valuable, and you would like to do that. Something that Levunga might be worried about is the fact that if you cycle Street Rave, you go to 16 life, and 16 is exactly 8 times 2, which means that 2 attacks from the Rhino tokens would be enough to defeat Levunga. So that is probably why we have seen the tank on the activation of the Street Rave.
Makes sense. But yeah, exactly. Two attacks now away, and obviously we are at their main phase, so they will get an attack with these rhinos if they do manage to live. Looks like we're going to play the Fire Is It and just pass the turn.
Yeah, so I guess the game is gonna be about whether Levunga finds the green source. Mostly, that seems like the most important thing right now. Awkwardly, that green source cannot be Botanical Sanctum anymore because that would be the fourth land.
Is there any line where we would actually sack the Fiery Islet for that reason, or
Yeah,
is it
maybe,
just
maybe we're
we're
gonna
going
see
to
that.
turn when we're going to come across sideways here with the rhinos, get 8 damage across, drop them down to 8. But now, like, they could just pass the turn up with potentially, their own force negations, these own mystical disputes, etc. So, real uphill battle here for Living End, unless we manage to, cycle our way kind of out of this situation, because we are just one attack phase from losing this game one. Oh, we're just going for it. We're just going for it straight into Sergeant Agent. Maybe they smell a bit of blood in the water.
Yeah, there is some reasons to play more rhinos if you don't want to have your lethal damage be interfered by, let's say, a um, the turtle that bounces a creature. What's the name of
There's a
it?
breeding pool off the top from that
Breeding pool.
cycle.
Yeah, that's what Levunga needed. Awesome.
So
Uh,
this is where things get complicated, right? So do we
oh,
cast it
it
in
is.
our turn and be weak to force negation? Do we wait for the upkeep and go off though force negation back up? Potentially they've then got 4 open mana. Like
There's a way to simplify that conundrum by utilizing griefs that Levunga has in his hand, right? So probably we're gonna see that. And once you grief, once you see what's exactly in the hand, you can take away the problematic card and then presumably just go off in the upkeep if you see, or just play the Shadow's Agent if you see the coast is clear right now. So certainly with 4 cards, probably gonna be pretty hard for Gabriel to have an appropriate response to that. The tapped breeding pool this turn is pretty
yeah.
big signifier of no mystical disputes in hand, right? Because you
Yeah,
most
that's why I was
likely
just
would
going to
like to
point that out
deploy it.
there, saying that
Yeah.
coming into play. Is there even a shout just to try and bluff by paying the 2 life there? Or do you think that it's not worth doing? Because normally Living End, it only takes 1 for them to be able to get 20 plus power back on the battlefield and run away with the game. Here comes the first grief. We're going to ditch the Living End that was drawn for the turn. Get a good
That's
look at the
actually
hand.
an excellent draw for Levunga. Just another black card to pitch it to Grief. So you have 2 Grief pitches and just you can make sure that you are impenetrable, basically.
Didn't get a good look at what that
Definitely,
was on our screen, but looks like Force
we do,
Negation was taken
yeah,
out of the hand.
we do see a Force of Negation being taken. So certainly not a surprise that that's the card you're taking. We gonna see revealed cards. Well, that was
Okay.
not very useful. That was
Unless you're
the
eagle-eyed.
Cascade pile. But yeah, the
Just tune
second
in.
grief can come. Second grief can come, take away more cards from hand, and you can just cascade safely.
And here comes another grief. I think there might have been 2 Force Negations in the hand. If I manage to get that right. So we take the second one here, then we know the coast is clear.
Let's see.
See, we could take the Shard's Agent actually. No, it looks like it is another Force Negation. So having double grief, that Living End off the top was a perfectly timed draw. Breeding Pool is going to come into play, drop us down to 6, and I think we're going to see probably an upkeep. Is there a reason to do Violent Outburst over Shard's Agent here?
Yeah,
I feel like Shard's Agent,
actually,
you've also got a 2/2 on the battlefield.
the
But then
reason
we know,
to keep
yeah,
Charlotte's Agent in your hand is to have your Force of Negation be still active, right? You don't
got you.
quite need it against the cards you see in Gabriel's hand, and knows the cards from Gabriel's hand, but just in case, you still get a Force of Negation blue card this way, so
I
you could get an
appreciate
extra
them there.
2/2 instead, but I would say that Levunga's board state is strong enough to close the game without the extra 2/2.
Well, yeah, no cards in hand. Is there any, because we left the Charlotte Agent in hand with Force, is there any reason that we should do this in the draw step? Because even if they draw another Force negation, we have an answer to it. So then we've got full knowledge. Because without doing the
Frankly,
math, I
you
don't think
know,
there's any draws here that can get them
frankly,
out of it.
it doesn't make a difference. Yeah, it doesn't. You see the board state, right? It's just like overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. So I think there's no difference in like Levunga had just a spare card to be saved that he didn't even need.
I'm trying to work out how much damage this is on the board. 10, 12, 14, 20, 23, like 23, 24 damage. Quite a lot. I'd love to have the section. So let's see if we can get the deck list up on the screen for you here. Let's go across. Give us a second, ladies and gentlemen. If you are tuning in, welcome. Obviously, this is the Mana Trace series. My name is Will, and I'm joined by the one and only Kanister, and we're bringing you this Mana Trace series this weekend. Here's the Living End deck they've got on screen. Looking at that sideboard there, I'm only seeing one endurance. Have a quick look in the main. No, we just got one
Only one
endurance.
endurance. Well,
But
that's one
there's
endurance,
four
but
other cards.
that is Matthias's list. So there's not too much need for the endurance. Gabriel is gonna be more interested in bringing Graveyard Hate to the battle next game. We also see 4 Leyline of the Void, which would be excellent at exiling the graveyard, but again, there is no need for that. So
I was say, is there anything here that you like bringing in?
the cards that you would like to bring in, it depends on what exactly is in the Rhino decklist that you are facing off against. If the hate you're going to be facing is endurance, which is the most common approach that most Rhinos players choose, then subtlety looks good. Mystical dispute can help you fight through counter magic a little bit if you need to. Sometimes it's a pretty useful tool to have, so certainly gonna be looking towards that. While cards like Colossal Sky Turtle or Brazen Borrower maybe are not the best, although we'll see. Maybe Levunga decides to keep those interaction cards in the deck anyways to slow down the clock from Rhinos a little bit.
Who tends to be favored post sideboard between these two Cascade decks? Does it does the playing field level itself out a little bit after sideboard with on the Rhino side because they get a bit access to a bit more counter magic and things like endurance, etc. Or does Living End still kind of have the edge?
It certainly gets better for Rhinos. It certainly advantages Rhinos more than it does Living End, the act of sideboarding. Although I wouldn't be comfortable claiming that that Rhinos is a favorite in a post-board game even. I think the matchup is a little bit rough for them even post-board.
Okay.
Endurance can be powerful, but it really needs to come together.
And one on sideboard, and obviously this is kind of like a combo deck, right? Like we have to put a certain amount of cards into our graveyard so we can then resolve Living End. That's the main game plan. When we start taking out cards, if we start taking out too many cyclers, we'll end up like not having enough to put in the graveyard, or we might not have enough counter magic to be able to get the Living End to resolve. How do we kind of like toy with that balance?
Certainly, it's a tough balance to tackle, and there is no one universal golden solution for that. But common cards include, some of the bounce spells that we have discussed before. The Sky Turtle, the Brazen Borrower can definitely be cards that can go if you need space and they're not excellent in the matchup. And also, you can just trim a little bit on cyclers, and if you need them a little bit less. And well, you don't really need them less, but
Yeah, I get you.
that's basically the only option left.
And we get to see the opening hand here. We've got lands, we've got cyclers. Like we've got a way to cascade. That is basically what you can find. And that's one of the things I like. Low land counts in the decks I play. That's just how my style of playing. Living End, I get to do that. I get to keep like one landers with 3 or 4 cyclers, and I'm going to keep turning through my deck, and the chances are I'll be able to hit my second, third land drop. So, yes, we only see 2 land in the hand, but there's 3 extra draws in the hand that we could do before turn 3, which is ideally the turn that we want to cascade off. We don't have access to the Rhinos list.
2 lands is
Hand.
perfect for a keep in
Mm-hmm.
Living End. Actually, that's like the amount that you want to see. I feel most often from my experiences with the deck. As you said, like you will most likely be able to cycle into extra lands because you take so many extra blind draws with your cyclers, and at the same time, Living End is actually a deck that's kind of prone to flooding a little bit,
Mm.
just because it is taking all of those extra blind draws with the cyclers. You just keep drawing cards from your deck. You're often 20 cards deep or something similar to that by turn 4. So there
Um,
is a little bit of a higher amount of variance than there is usually tied to the amount of lands you draw.
we see Living End drawn there for the turn. Obviously, normally quite bad. You don't really want to be drawing the spell you want to cascade into. But in this deck, we've got other ways of reusing it, so to speak, with cards like Grief.
Certainly, that's a nice upside of Living End as a card. Pitching it to Grief, it basically kind of functions as part of your mana base. I like to think about it this way.
So we're now seeing obviously a lot of just land go. Some Rhinos lists we do see playing Blood Moons. That'd be pretty rough on the other side of the battlefield because it looks like we're kind of fetching for our basics here. We only need one card, one mana source that can fetch red. If we potentially fetch green and slam a Blood Moon and it resolves, that in itself could just be game over. Obviously, we see there's a Brazen Burrow in the hand, so we would have a way to get it off the battlefield. And we're respecting that on the other side that we decided not to go get a green source with our fetch land. We decided to just go get a basic island.
Yeah, certainly that's a little bit of respect towards Blood Moon. We see that Matthias actually even brought an extra Brazen Borrower, so he seems to actively like them in the
Oof.
matchup. The
How many
second
living
Living
ends
End
does he play in
drawn.
the main?
There was a full 4 in the main deck, but it's pretty common to trim down on Living Ends when you need space. So we'll see how many are left in the deck. Certainly, when you draw 2, it's kind of scary territory, and you do risk maybe running out of them sometimes. So definitely not comfortable.
We did manage to find our third land drop, that Misty Rainforest there. We're going to fetch end of turn. See what we fetch up. Maybe the game's well. It is a basic forest. This could
That
be
certainly
what?
does signal Blood Moon a little bit, being present in the deck.
So we're going to cascade, get ourselves a couple of 4/4s. We don't have the ability to counter this. Doing it at end step.
Although Matthias might take a hit, and then if he draws an untapped land, he can use his bounce spells to interact with the Rhino tokens if that's what he wants to do.
Yep, but Brazen Bow, it's not just a 3/1 flyer. It does have a bit of added text on there that we see from a lot of these cards that manage to go on adventures. It can be a bounce card if we need it to be for 2 mana. Just waiting while things are on the stack. It looks like we're just waiting to give the creatures +1/+0. We probably will get an attack in here, dropping them down to 7 life. We don't have much reach though, right? We don't play like lightning bolts and things like this to go to the face, or potentially any
We
spells that
cannot
cost
play
under
lightning bolt.
3.
Yeah.
Like you
We
could
can
play it,
play
it's just
fire
not
ice.
recommended.
Yeah, that would be a pretty silly
Mm.
deck building decision, I would say. we we do see like fire ice and rhinos, and that's mostly it as far as burn spells are concerned. So there is a little bit of reach, but 7 is not burnout range. It's more like 4, I guess. 2 is when you can see burn spells finishing the job. So we're probably gonna see Gabriel attacking with the rhinos and then just maybe playing a land and chilling behind
Force it. But
chilling
what are they
behind a
worried about right now, right? A
chicken to
resolved living
interaction,
end.
although we don't know.
Well, they're trying to think, how do we lose this game now? Right? I've got the power on the battlefield. I'm one tack step away from being able to win this game, level it back up to one apiece. What cards do I need to not resolve here? How can I play around them? Do we wait for a living end to resolve, then count on the living end? Do we have to have a whole lot multiple? Because potentially now we could hard cast a force negation as well as force negation plus ditch if we've potentially got multiple of them in our hand. We do have 6 cards in
Certainly.
hand. It could be a lot. We do see on the other side of the battlefield another force in there, plus Sky Turtles. We're going to see how we want
Those
to get.
would be the cards that Gabriel wants to see in their hand. Just as you said, forces and endurances also, frankly, would also be fairly useful.
I don't have a total, but I'm going to go on a limb here and say there is a good 20 power in that graveyard for the living end player. If it manages to come across and connect, they decide to hide the graveyard for me. Prove that. There we go. Bringing it up. It's almost like they heard me. So we're going to have a little look what's in here. We've got 4, 8, 20, well over 20. It's almost got to be closer to 30, I'd say.
I would classify the amount of power present in the graveyard as enough.
Enough. Okay, cool. That's the expert opinion of Kanister MTG. It's why we get him here, pay him the big bucks, so he can give us that stellar expert opinion. Thank you very much, good sir. We're still waiting. See what we're going to do here. See if we're going to take this 8 points of damage. Maybe we're double queuing. I don't know if there's a challenge on something like that at the moment, but let's sit back, ready. I'm going to go on a limb and say that the life total is going to drop down to 7, potentially 6 from a fetch land. It's just what is going to go from there. We're going to see how they want to play this game out.
Seems like you were right.
Look, I'm not saying that I get paid as much as you, but they did pick me to go with you. So here we are. There's the land drop. 5 cards left in hand. And we're going for it. It looks like we're going to go for more rhinos. No, a Merc. Okay, this is a good one we can talk about. Kind of, comes in and out of favor. Some decks play this, some decks don't. What's the advantages of playing this in your rhinos list?
Well, the advantage is just getting access to more threats, right? It's became more popular since the introduction of the main deck dispute, and it makes sense. It's kind of twofold, right? You Cat Fury, which often used to be a threat you top decked, a threat you played after your Cascade spells that just finished the job, being a 6-power attacker. So you kind of replace that with Mectide Regent, and also by adding Mystical Dispute, which you are often looking to cast for 1 mana, you are adding more spells to your deck, so you can delve more spells for a Mectide Regent. It's going to be bigger on average, and all of that just adds up into it being fairly reasonable to add up a Mectide Regent or 2, or maybe even 3, as some lists do, as alternative threats to Rhinos.
So does this tell us anything about their hand? Obviously, they could have just left mana open there, and I'd be like, okay, I've got to play around double force plus mystical dispute, you know. But now they've tapped 2 of their blue sources, played another threat on the battlefield. They just sit going, if you've got it, you've got me. If you don't have it, cool. I'm going to, win the game more. What?
There still can be pitch spells in Gabriel's hand, but certainly tapping out for Mectide Regent like this does signify that you are not particularly interested in just holding up all of your mana, which seemingly would be the case if your hand would be just a pile of Force of Negations and other interactions. So Gabriel just wants to finish the game fast while he's seemingly slightly ahead and has some interaction. And we're gonna see if this Living End warrants a response. It actually does. And Endurance is getting evoked, pitching a green card. Presumably
And
targeting
that's that. That's all it is. And Modern Horizon 2 cards are good. Who would have thought? We spoke about endurance. Let's see if we can get the list back up on the screen. There it is. So this is where definitely the endurance came in. Pretty sure. Oh no, wrong. This is wrong. I keep thinking we're looking at the rhinos list. We're looking at the Living End list. I'm like, obviously they brought the ley lines in, but clearly not. Okay, going into game 3. They're on the play. Anything you take back out or put back in, or do you think it's quite just clear cut, shuffle up, and just present again, so to speak?
If I were Levunga, I would probably rethink my bounce, my inclusion of the bounce spells in my possible configurations. Certainly, Brazen Borrower is better when you are on the draw as Living End, because the danger of Blood Moon is just much higher, and also the pressure from Rhinos is higher on average. When Living End is going to be on the play, then I think it is possible that you would be interested in playing more copies of Cyclers just to be a more stable, more consistent deck, more likely to take advantage of the fact that you are on the play and you are going to have the tempo advantage. That said, the concession that we have seen seemed actually, well, it was a little bit interesting. We've seen a concession in response to just an endurance. So the Living End that was about to resolve would actually still sweep the battlefield that Gabriel has built, leaving the battlefield smaller with just a Charles Agent on Levunga's end and an Endurance, the evoked endurance in Gabriel's battlefield. What it could signify is that Matthias chose to board down on Living End. We have seen him draw 2 copies of Living End and concede when his third copy
Yeah,
was unsuccessful. So if
potentially
he
could
doesn't
just
have
be
any
the
more,
last one.
yeah, if it's just his last Living End, if there is no more Living Ends in the deck to do the thing with, then certainly that could prompt a concession because that Shadowless Agent alone is probably not beating the 3/4 endurance.
No, we do see there is a hard way to cast it, Sunken Ruins, but not really when you want to be doing when your opponent's probably bringing in a lot of counter magic. Going into game 3, I still think this is like we've seen Gemstone Caverns in these type of decks. Don't see it in this deck, but we do see it occasionally in Rhinos. Basically trying to break serve, get themselves a mana ahead. How kind of key is it to be the first person cascading in these mirrors?
Oh, it's really strong. So certainly, if Gabriel is equipped with any Gemstone Caverns, and certainly that's a card that they would be happy to see in their opening hand. As you said, stealing the serve, breaking the serve, stealing the play, just very attractive proposition.
Okay, game 3. Round number 1, if you're just tuning in, welcome. It was 139 players this weekend, battling out in Modern Action. We've got 8 rounds for you today before we're back tomorrow with a cut to top 8. I'm going to see who's walking away with the invite and how much money people are going to be walking away with. Looking at this opening hand, obviously we've got hand readers. It's on the players if they've downloaded the correct software and they've got it working, etc. So we only get to see the living name player this time I go around, but then the future matchups potentially we'll be able to see both players' hands. So don't worry about that. Talk to me about this hand. A lot of griefs in that hand and land, but not too many cyclers. We just see the lone street wraith there.
So that's still ahead. I think I'm happy to keep. You can use Grief and Street Rave to. You can use the Street Rave, try to find to chain a little bit more cyclers. And the upside of Grief being both an interaction spell and still a creature that returns from your graveyard to the battlefield with your living end is pretty enormous and very helpful in situations like that where your living end might be just smaller because you happen not to draw too many cyclers.
And on cue there, cycle street wraith into the living end that we potentially don't want in our hand. But as we said, we've got multiple griefs, so we can get rid of that one. And we're just going to pass the turn back. We see this a lot, right? There's a lot of pass, go, pass, go. That's why kind of suspending this question for Hills on turn 1 is a play you see quite a lot in these Rhino mirror decks, not mirrors.
Certainly. Blabunga is just choosing to hold his griefs for as long as he can, that he can have perfect information on the turn that he would like to cascade on. There's some reasons to rush with your griefs, mostly endurance, because sometimes a grief can prompt an endurance evoke, which would
Mm-hmm.
like clear what you have already built so far. But with a small graveyard to begin with, I think Levunga is interested in just holding his griefs and then checking Gabriel's hand on this turn.
So what is the size of graveyard you're happy to cascade with? Like, could we have gone for it this turn if we didn't see this Fire and Ice? Very common play that we see in these Rhino lists, doing this in the upkeep before they're able to get free mana, which we all know is the key turn that they can use for the cascade. So we're going to see this here, tapping the Mechanical Sanctum.
Certainly, a Strip to Riverwinder, a 5/5 hexproof, a Street Wraith, and Grief would be enough to make me happy and would make me want to go for it if I see that the coast is clear through with my griefs. So the Fire Ice is going to stop that. And also, Gabriel fetching a forest might be a little bit of a problem for Matthias if he needs to face Blood Moon.
Yeah,
So we're
as
probably
we
gonna see Grief right now to play around that.
I was literally just about to ask that because we don't really have any counter magic up. The only thing we've got is grief. Are we firing off now to potentially snag a blood moon if the one is one in hand? And also, we don't even know if there's blood moons in the list. They've just been playing like they do have blood moons. This could be, maybe they brought them in for game 2, they've took them out for game 3. But just keeping your opponent thinking and playing around. Sometimes not making the optimal play. Like realistically, you don't want to be playing grief this turn because we can't cascade off. But we might be forced to because if a blood moon comes down, that could just be game.
Yeah,
and
there's
being
3 Blood Moons in the sideboard, and also it is worth mentioning that this tournament is an open decklist tournament, so players have full information and full awareness of what is exactly in their opponent's sideboards at all times. So they do have the ability to play around exactly what could happen.
seeing. Right, we're just passing the turn back by the looks of it. Again, this could represent multiple different types. So we didn't see the Blood Moon, but it could be Instant Speed Cascade, it could be Force Negation, and this is where we'll start firing off these griefs. Let's have a look what's
Yeah.
in the hand.
So also curiously, last turn we've seen Levunga not be interested in playing around Blood Moon, holding his grief to this turn. Until this turn, it does help you play a little bit around endurance. This way, if you grieve, if that grief prompts Gabriel to play an endurance, then Levunga has options to play a violent outburst in response. If if the endurance was hardcast, maybe then you can kill it. You can return your 5/5 hexproof and your street rave still. So
So this happens a lot, right?
certainly,
Like stacking your triggers correctly. Obviously, we want to look at the hand before it goes to the graveyard, potentially in case there is an endurance in the hand. Yes, it'll get rid of the other two, but the grief will still be left there for potentially future living ends if we decide to go that way.
yeah, certainly very important to stack your triggers correctly. If you evoke first and then look at your opponent's hand, and that opens you to endurance plays for no reason. So just remember to evoke last, I guess, with grief.
I
There might be
always have
some
to say
cases
to
where you want
myself,
to.
I always have to go first in, last out. I literally have to say it out loud to myself every time I'm playing Modo when I'm clicking and stacking my
Mm.
triggers and right, first in, last out, first in, last out. But we're
Certainly, it
deciding
takes a while to get used to.
not when you're the one and only Kanister MTG and have been, some would say that you had a impactful and important place in Magic history. That you saved
I
people
would
during
say
the pandemic, but we'll get onto that one as we later on. As it looks like we've got a couple of violent outbursts and force negations, and there where we get a good look at it. 2 violent outbursts, a brazen burrow, a gemstone cabin, and a petty theft. And the force negation is what we choose to get rid of. Is this going to be
yeah,
a good enough turn for you to violent outburst, or do you?
certainly. What Levunga can do is just wait with the violent outburst until Gabriel's upkeep to make sure that Gabriel doesn't get to resolve Rhinos in the end step.
But is that big? Is that
So,
good enough though? Because like looking at the battlefield, a couple of 4/4s. Like end of turn now, we're going to make a couple of 4/4s. But if they potentially do it, if they don't, we've got the ability to make
well,
16 power. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. Potentially 19 power. That's not going to line up too well against the other side of the battlefield.
what we're gonna see, I believe, is that Gabriel will make a decision in the end set as to whether he wants to cast Violent Outburst or not. Then Levunga can retaliate with his own Violent Outburst after the Rhinos are already in place, so the living end would sweep them. So if Gabriel doesn't go for a Violent Outburst on the end step, then I would assume that given Levunga's hand, Levunga is still interested in cascading in Gabriel's upkeep. That way, Gabriel can resolve at most a pair of Rhinos.
We've also got this Crusher Fields on suspend. Not entirely sure how many
Yeah,
counters left on it, but it's been out there for a while. This might be the
that's
turn it
also
gets cast,
incredible.
right? Which would, I think this is going to be the last counter coming off it, which means, oh no, it's
No,
two. Okay, 2
no,
counters left.
still one more turn. So it's actually pretty rough. It's not clear if Levunga wants to living end now. The upside is that a 5/5 hexproof matches up really nice against any amount of 4/4 tokens, right? So
Hmm.
that would be a good blocker, and you might want to take your opportunity to living end to resolve your cascade spell for sure with no interruptions while you have it. And then it seems like if Levunga went for a violent outburst right now, it would not be game ending,
No.
but it would be helpful. So we see Levunga actually taking the decision to wait a little bit, trying to to go for an end of turn violent outburst instead, interestingly.
So talk to me about this. Why were we choosing to do this now? I suppose one of the grief gets to take one of the outbursts out of the hand, or the brazen bow, whichever one they decide's more important. So only
Yeah,
one of them will actually get to resolve.
to, to do it in the end step instead of doing it main phase is a little bit nebulous to me.
Especially because we've got rhinos coming down next turn as well. Potentially, if we do it next upkeep after that crushing field resolves, we're definitely going to catch 4. We're just weak to if they've actually drawn anything, but we've already gone to the end steps. So they would have drawn this card either way. So, maybe it's a little bit of a discipline here, deciding when to fire things off, when not to. But we'll see how it pans out for both these players.
Yeah, by waiting until the end step, Levunga opened himself to Gabriel drawing an extra interaction card for the living end or for anything else. At the same time, you do get to look at more cards with grief, so there's upsides and downsides. So with how this game plays out, we're gonna see board stall, I guess, right? We're gonna see the stripped Riverwinder holding down 4 rhinos, and I guess Grief and Street Rave cheating on the wayside. And
Who's
from
it?
this point on, Levunga is going to try to find cyclers, I guess, and build a bigger graveyard to try to go for a living end later in the game once again to actually create a winning uh, board position, because right now we're kind of even.
I was going to say to you, like, who does that kind of advantage of them both just looking at each other, kind of in a stalemate? Because the good thing about Living End is, sure, you're going to attack me, I'll block, my creatures will die, they'll go to the graveyard, I'll just bring them back again with the next Living End.
Yeah, certainly that does advantage living end, with one extra small caveat being the fact that if Levunga happens to draw all of his living ends, and as we've seen, the concession in last game might have indicated that there is only 3 in his postboard configuration against Rhinos. So if there is only 3 in his postboard configuration against Rhinos, then it would mean that there is only one more living end available to him this game. One living end has been pitched as grief fuel earlier in the game, and one has already been cast. So that's a potential danger that Levunga has to consider, I guess.
And that was another land off the top. We did speak about how, this deck is pretty prone to flooding with the amount of cards that it does see through its cycling. And we're seeing that now just with a grief and a couple more lands in hand. Just playing these rhinos back to back. Look, that's now 16 power on the battlefield. Plus, that we can also bounce something if we really wanted to, or get ourselves a 3/1 flyer. There are no flyers on the other side of the battlefield, so potentially that's how we can start chipping away and doing damage. At what point do we potentially do like an outburst bluff here, and that our rhinos give them 5 power to trade with the Riverwinder? Is that something that could end up happening at some point, or we just keep drawing these off the top by the looks of it, just keep filling the board with more rhinos? That's the last one.
No, Rhinos number 4.
One more
That's
left.
Rhinos number 3, so there's one more
And
left.
one more. Okay, that's a
But
lot of rhinos. I think they call it. Is it a crash of rhinos when you
Crash of
have?
Rhinos, yeah.
Yeah,
That's why it's called Crushing Footfalls, I think, because
it's another land off the top.
the land, well,
Well, we need a big top deck on the other side of the battlefield just to like even stay in this. Because if we've got 3 blockers, this is 14 power coming across. But
it's
then
definitely
we can bounce one of the creatures to get a trampling rhino to do an extra 4 points. This could just be lethal if we go for it. But do we pull the trigger? Well,
I
okay,
mean,
that answers the
assuredly you
question.
do, right? Assuredly you do. So yeah, you were asking about that violent outburst bluff attack. The answer is immediately.
Not
It
not
seems.
needed.
Yeah, it's
Obviously,
not even much of a bluff. You know, you just attack because it's favorable for you.
4,
So
8,
right now,
12, 14, 16 coming across if we don't use the brazen borrower in hand.
and it's just plainly lethal if you do use the brazen borrower, so you can bounce either grief or street rave. Probably going to target grief, as that makes doesn't let Levunga cycle and draw a living end. And that's it. That's the
That's
win from Gabriel.
Easy. When you write it up, you know what I mean? We said about flooding and how it could happen. It did unfortunately happen from there, but congratulations, Rhinos taking it down. The one of the most played decks this weekend. Welcome everybody if you're just tuning in. My name is Will Hall. That there is Kanister MTG. Obviously, we are not Corey and Ross. They're having a weekend away. They're a weekend away? Maybe they are having a weekend away, but they're not going to be here this weekend, but they'll be back next month. They'll be putting on the best job. We're going to do our best to try and hold the fort for them. We're going to see if we've got any more backup feature matches for you all. I'm going to look at Adrian virtually to see if we've got any more, see if he'll whisper in my ear. He's just sorting out in the background. A lot to break down this weekend. We do have a bounty, though, this weekend going on. But obviously, like everything in Magic, things don't always go to plan. They got the by the first round. It is Brad Nelson, world-renowned Magic player for being the brother of Corey Meister. As you see there on your screen, that is how he is best known. It's not for his Magic accomplishments, it's for being Corey's brother. But everybody that gets paired against him this weekend that manages to defeat him will win themselves an extra $50 at the end of the day. So if you play him in the Swiss and then play him in the top 8 and you beat him both times, that's an extra $100 in your pocket. You have to love that. Whew. A lot to break down. Obviously, we know he's going to be 1-0 because he did get the bye. Out of everybody in the tournament, I don't know what the odds are that Brad would get it, but here we are. Lovely guy. Obviously, puts a lot of hard work into MTG Millie. A lot of things we see on a lot in Magic these days, especially with the paper and competitive scene. And there's Corey with less hair than I've ever seen him in my life. Normally, he's got that big fro on his head. He's going to love me saying that. I think he's floating around in the chat as well. Was giving us a little bit of stick there, saying that, I'm very loud and you're very quiet, Kanister. I don't know what he could possibly be meaning.
That's just how things are.
That's just how things are. Just, I'm a big, loud man. You're just a gentle giant. Okay, I've got word in there. There's only a couple matches left and they're going to be over real shortly. So we're not going to go back to any of them. We're going to go from us. We'll be back super shortly. Be a couple minutes before we get back. We're going to start working out round number 2. We'll probably end up having Brad on that. I imagine Adrian will confirm that in my ear in a second. So make sure you stick around for more Mana Trade action. See you all soon. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mana Trader series. My name is Will Hall, better known on the internet as the Will Hall EXP, and I'm joined by the phenomenal control player himself, Kanister MTG, and we are bringing you the Mana Trader series this weekend. Obviously, usually Corey and Ross, this time they've stepped away for just the one event. Don't worry about it. They're coming back. Don't worry about that. We're going to go straight into this weekend's action of Modern, though. We're going to look at the metagame breakdown. What did 139 players bring this weekend? What is the most played deck? It is going to be Rhinos and Creativity. We're just going to fly through this. We get to do a bit of a deep dive into this earlier on, but Rhinos, we've just seen it take down there. Game 1 looked very good. In a matchup we thought might not have been too good for it with Living End, but unfortunately, flood does happen in Magic the Gathering. Let's focus a little bit more.
Rhinos proved to be the slightly more consistent deck. It's a bit simpler, but also a bit more consistent. So that prevailed this much.
Are you saying that Rhinos players are simple? I just want to get that on camera if you are or not. Just making sure.
Not necessarily, although you could say that the deck construction of Rhinos is pretty straightforward.
Okay, got you.
It still takes a lot of finesse to use the deck properly and win games of Magic, which can get insanely complicated and hard to navigate through. So no judgment passed on anyone whatsoever.
No comment. Okay. I was just wondering. If that's where you were going with it, because people, say that about me because I'm an Infect player time to time. But Creativity, we spoke about lots of different ways to build this deck. Have you got like a favorite? Do you think there's one that's more potentially got a few more win percentage points than others? Potentially 4-color over Jund or something along those lines, or they both got their own strengths depending on what meta you're going to be moving into?
It's a bit tricky. Like, I'm a big fan of Persist as a card. At the same time, I do acknowledge that it is not necessarily actually the best way to build Creativity always, and many players are trending more into the direction of a 4-color control deck that just kind of uses a sprinkle of Creativity when it needs to, but it actually rarely casts it. So cards like the Fairy, Leyline Binding, all that kind of stuff. So while I'm a fan of Better Unions and Persist, which can give you some very explosive and powerful combo draws, it does seem like the more control-ish versions, oftentimes using the newly printed card, change the equation as an extra way to interact with well, most of your opponents, despite change the equation being seemingly a color hate specific anti-red green color hate card.
Okay,
Those
moving
control
down.
versions seem to have more success.
So moving down to like the mid-range deck, so we got it like the Juns as a format, as you put it. Is it Murktide, Rakdos, mid-range? Kind of just under 10% here. People that bought it this weekend, very powerful decks. Super like one plays a little bit like Delver and Legacy. The other one's is like semi-newish kind of combo deck. It's not new at this point, but it's Modern Horizons 2 kind of new. Where we've got like the scam effect. Why do we call it scam? Like what why did that name come out? What are the cards that kind of produce that?
The origins of that name are actually kind of contentious, and I'm not entirely sure where it comes from. Some people will tell you that they feel somewhat scammed when that happens to them. When a grief takes two of your cards and leaves a powerful menace threat on the battlefield, and you kind of have you struggle from the get-go, especially if you were on the draw. And some other players might link the origins with some tweets from the originator of the deck, Pascal Maynard, who I think named the deck a scam deck, as in that he did not necessarily believe in it being too powerful. But it's pretty unclear, and it's we have to leave that up to Magic historians to uncover.
Do we even have Magic historians anymore? I think they all got rid of, didn't they? I thought we deleted the history of everything on the internet to do with Magic. But yeah, it's a different subject for another time. Is it Murktide? Okay, so we've seen that. I think we're going to see our player to watch this round's going to be on Is it Murktide? So maybe we don't need to touch that too much. We've got Hammer Time. We spoke how good this can be. This is kind of the closest I'm ever going to get to Infect on camera. Very explosive at times, can grind out, has quite a good, a couple of sideboard cards being in the color of white. Sometimes they kind of splash here and there. And we just saw Living End. So let's see if we get onto the second page here. And just going to fire that across for us. Boom. Omnath. 4/5 color control. We spoke about the different ways to build this. You can go the elemental route, you can go a control route. You've got the new Nissa. Talk us through like how Nissa's kind of bit of resurgence in this deck.
This Resurgent Animist is just yet another value card advantage free drop that this deck can play. That slot frequently being occupied previously by Risen Reef in more elemental heavy versions, and maybe Fable of the Mirror Breakers and some others. And this is just like yet another way to approach that. It is nice to play in a deck containing Ren and 6, as the elemental deck oftentimes wants to play a longer game, be the control deck in any given matchup. It does want to take many turns, but oftentimes that ends with the elemental deck flooding a little bit, especially with Ren 6 providing an extra unending stream of fetch lands. You just have more lands that you ever need. Being able to convert those fetch lands into guaranteed spells, which is what Nissa's trigger does, is excellent. So that's why the card appears to be successful.
I know people are thinking at home and everyone's looking at the screen going, generic Ragavan. What deck is a generic Ragavan?
We don't fully know, but we can presume that it is an Underworld Breach based deck that also utilizes Ragavan. I guess we can guess with high certainty that it does contain Ragavan.
And then finishing it off, we've obviously got Yawgmoth, Hardened Scales. Okay, Yawgmoth, I'm all over. That's my deck of choice. I love how that one works. Hardened Scales makes my brain hurt. I'd stay away from that deck. I'm not a fan of even playing against it because I've got to then play the deck. Basically, am I dead? Am I not? And then finishing off with Mill and Burn. Okay, it isn't a random mill deck that has burn spells in it. It's not a burn deck that mills you. It is mill and burn, a couple of decks pointing out. And then all the others are like decks that are only like 1 and 2s of, which we might see a splattering of throughout the day. But we do have players to watch. We've got a couple of popular names on MTGO entering this event. Here's they are up on the screen for you now with their records. Doesn't look like everyone had a good day. That looks like a lot of 0-1s going that round one. So let's start with X Whale, Jesco Breach. He managed to win his round one. Jesco Breach, one of the decks I've seen you play quite a lot on your stream. Super powerful, especially if your opponent doesn't know what is going on or what they need to be playing around.
Certainly. It's a deck I like. It's like the kind of splintered twin situation. Well, you have a combo, but you're also backing your combo up with just generically good cards and interactions. So you put your opponent in tough spots over and over, and they struggle to sideboard against you, and you get to win games that you're not necessarily supposed to win. The downside is that, like in the grinding station versions of the Underworld Breach combo deck, frankly, the combo is just fairly weak and it doesn't actually carry all that many games. So you're probably more so a backup plan deck, as funny as that sound. Like your backup plan is actually your main plan in the majority of your games.
And then we've got Twinless Twin managing to take down his own. Won the challenge. I believe it was last weekend. He won the challenge. Said he had to, put everyone back in their place and to remind everybody that Blue Red Murktide is the best deck in Modern. You should all be playing it. And a lot of people, we've seen this deck just continuously put up results after results after results in the hands of some of the better players, not only playing in this tournament, but just generically around the world that are playing Modern. And one of them is our bounty for the weekend. The one and only Brad Nelson himself, obviously best known for being Corey's slightly less famous brother. Moving into it, he did get the bye round one, so he is starting off with a winning record. And anybody that gets paired against him or manages to beat him will get themselves an extra $50. Unfortunately for bye, they did not manage to take him down. Have you ever played against Brad?
Certainly, yeah. During our MPL years, we have faced off against each other semi frequently. Always a formidable opponent for someone who's just an older brother of pro player and commentator Corey Baumeister.
I know he's put up quite good results considering he's kind of got to live in the shadow of the one and only Corey Baumeister himself. Prizes. What are we playing for this weekend? Obviously, we had the Swiss, which is how everybody qualified for this. If people just tune in, don't know, how could you be playing this weekend? It is a free tournament. All you need to do is sign up and play the Swiss rounds. If you see there, if you're a non-subscriber, you can play all the way up to get yourself some dollars. And then if you are a Manchester subscriber, you're going to get a 10 times bonus. For this weekend in particular, this Swiss that we're watching right now, 8 rounds of it, with a cut to top 8 tomorrow that will be played. If you come first, you're going to get yourself $300. If you're a Manchester subscriber, boom, $3,000. Same with second, 200 and 2,000. But the big thing that they get is free invites to the $25,000 tournament at the end of the year. That is an invite only 45 player tournament. Absolutely crazy and exclusive. Moving down, this is the December tournament. This is the prizes that they will be going towards. 5,000 for first place. And that's of course if you're a Manchester subscriber, but why wouldn't you be? You should all be Manchester subscribers. Moving down, we've got a few more bits and bobs coming down. You get actual hard cash, and then you go to actually having like Manchester subscription credit. So you can pay for your Manchester subscriptions with not only MTGO ticks, not only hard money, but also the cash that you generate from these tournaments. Highly recommend it all. Not just because I'm saying I genuinely was doing this before I got this gig. I genuinely think Manchester is great in everything they do, and they let everyone play at a real high level of Magic, which we can do on MTGO. It's one of the best ways to test moving. So
Certainly a great service.
it is. I think it's great. But it looks like we've got our main feature match, which we have said is the one and only Brad Nelson, and they're against. Let me see if I can get that name. Hint, is it? Can't quite make that out correctly, but yeah, Hint. Okay, so we're going to see what decks they're on. We've got obviously Murktide, but we don't know what they're against. We're going to get that all loaded up for you all. It looks like Creativity.
Creativity, yeah.
How do you
With a
think
white
these two
splash.
matches line up?
It's a pretty close match and like pretty hotly disputed. I think depending who you ask, those players tend to tell you that they favor one side or the other, probably choosing their favorite deck from amongst those two. But the match is certainly very close, and Creativity has lots of tools to pose huge problems for Murktide, while Murktide can also keep up interaction and play the Delver style game plan.
What's like the key?
Them.
What's the key cards? Let's start on Brad's side. Okay. Apparently, Brad he registered with the wrong deck. to the thing. So we're going to move ourselves back to us here in the virtual booth. Me and Kanister off camera have been trying our hardest to try and get a virtual high five going. It hasn't worked out yet. So maybe throughout this weekend, we might try and give it a go. Do you want to go? Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. It didn't look great. We'll work on it, chat. We'll work on it. It's fine. Okay, right. We're going to go back down to the match after that terrible mistake. They basically just said that is never do that again or you're fired. Right. Did Brad register with the correct deck? Let's see how we move here. He's definitely on Murktide. I think he just maybe had the wrong flavor of Murktide. How about that for an opening hand, though? All the one drops you could possibly have with one
You
man.
did ask me about the key cards in the matchup, and I was about to say that I do think one of the more important cards in the matchup. Well, it depends, but one of the more important cards in the matchup can be Dragon Rage's Channeler, providing early pressure and pressure that is not concerned with the ground blockers that the Dwarven Mines can produce. Ragavan can easily get shut down by Ren or the Dwarf tokens, while DRC is going to stay there in play and pressure creativity. That said, there is many approaches, and certainly there is also approaches that would be interested in cutting DRC in post-sport games when you want to play more of a control-ish game against creativity.
Do
Unfortunately
you like this
for
hand, though?
McKinn's, I don't like the McKinn's hand at all, and I was not really a big fan of the opening hand for Brad either. So we see both players mulliganing to 6,
And
looking
here he looks like
for
we've
more
kept
lands.
double Ragavan Lightning Bolt Expressive Iteration. Obviously, super powerful card. Only legal in a handful of formats now. It's that powerful. But Ragavan, talk to me about the best one drop in Modern. Come at me, chat. I know you're going to come at me saying it's not. You know, there's going to be people saying Death Right Shaman, but this monkey, it's pretty good at what it does.
Well, you said in modern, so it's pretty fair to say that Ragavan is the best one drop in modern, with Deathrite Shaman not being legal. But it is something that people discuss a lot, and to this day we don't have, let's say, clarity on which card is preferable. I'm certainly on Team Ragavan. I think the card is just extremely powerful. But as we said, against creativity specifically, it can get shut down later in the game by the dwarf tokens. It matches up really poorly against the dwarven mines, making free blockers for it. So
you want
we'll
it in the
see
early
how this game
stages,
goes.
right? And that's kind of what we're seeing here with Brad. He had the option of keeping one Dragon Range Channeler and a Ragavan. Decided to keep 2 Ragavans over in the Dragon Range Channeler because he kind of lined up, it's probably going to die here. So, you know, I do want a second one to come down. He's
Yeah, it
just going to
also
put
makes
2
sense
threats.
to keep 2 Ragavans in your opening hand when you are on the draw as the Merktide player. So pretty heads up play from Brad's side. It does play around Ren and 6 pretty well. If your opponent on creativity is going to go turn 2 Ren minus on Ragavan, then you can use your second Ragavan to dash kill Ren.
I was just about to say the one thing we don't want to see off the top over on Brad's side is a Ren and 6 to come down, and Ren and 6 is the draw. Obviously, the ping ability on that would be quite good on this board if it was to. If that's, I think we've got the ability to actually go Ren and 6 and Leyline's Binding this turn if we wanted to.
Yeah,
So if we
actually
go,
no, because
do
we
we not
would
have
need to
green?
fetch a Blood Crypt to do that, right? So if we fetch a Blood Crypt, then there is no way to cast both Ren and a white spell because you have Steven's Blood Crypt and you need to produce green and white.
That is why you're sat here in the expert role and I am not. That was a good spot there. So do we prioritize one over the other? Is it worth getting Ren and 6 down this turn? How much respect are we putting on this Ragavan basically connecting? Because I always get the feeling when I see it on the battlefield, I kind of have to kill it. I can't let it live. I can't possibly let it hit me once. If it is, I fall so far behind. I know that's not like super true, but we're going to see now how much respect we do have for this Ragavan. It looks like that is what we are going to take.
That's
Why
a
are we
good
doing
amount of
this? Talk to me about the sorcery speed. Leyland's Binding. It does have the word flash on it.
It does have the word flash in it, but while you can cast your spells at instant speed, oftentimes you are not necessarily supposed to, especially if your opponent's playing a blue-red deck full of counter spells. We have seen 3 spell pierces in Brad's deck, so certainly trying not to get gotten by that spell pierce when resources for McKinty are just very, very low and there is little interest in trading like that. What was more interesting to me was the choice of getting rid of Ragavan and leaving Dragon Rage's Channeler in play. If you let the Dragavan hit you once, then you can maybe try to utilize your Dwarven Mind to interact with it favorably. Starting with the next turn, but now the Red and 6 Dwarven Mind, they don't actually do anything against the Dragon Rage's Channeler, so we might need to find a removal spell, or the pressure from DRC will start adding up. Although, of
It-
course, what Mekint really wants is a creativity of the top. That's like a game-winning draw, or
and
close to. Ooh,
just a
Teferi
Teferi.
too.
Are we going to deploy that? Looks like we are going to deploy it. Bounce the
That was a
Dragon
good
Rage Channel
draw.
back, and we draw another Dwarven Mine. Make yourself a little 1/1. It's kind of where we want to be, right? Because now the counter spells are turned off future ways. If they need to use a removal spell, like potentially Lightning Bolt on Holy Heat, we see them in hand. If they use them, it's one less card in their hand that's going at either one of our dwarf tokens or our face. But it does look like we're just going to be able to absolutely refill our not only board state, but get kind of clear the other side.
Yeah.
Trying to think what's going. So creativity is still a really good draw here for us because we've got a second Dwarven Mine in hand.
For the most part, we're probably going to see. We probably see Brad deciding between spending Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt on this Teferi Time Raveler. It's a little bit of a tricky decision, right? You would like to keep your Unholy Heat because it's better at clearing a bigger Teferi or Archon of Cruelty if it comes to that. But at the same time, Lightning Bolt can go face, and with McKint at a pretty convenient, exact 12 life and multiple of 3 is pretty attractive in some way too. We see an even different play, interestingly.
Let's see
Brad
what
is playing a Murktide Region, bolting a Dwarf token, going for, well, not quite lethal damage next turn because he did choose to keep Unholy Heat over the Lightning Bolt.
one thing we did see there is the extra text there on Dragon Rage Channel with the Survey 1 every time we cast a sorcery instant spell, basically filling up our graveyard so we can kind of like turbo out these big powerful cards like Murktide, right?
Yeah.
Another Dwarven Mind drawn for the turn. Not so good against these flyers.
But a very heads-up play by Brad, just not spending a removal spell on Teferi, which would be many players' intuition, I believe.
Mhm.
And it would be my intuition in large part. He just chose not to care about it because his line of play didn't really need that anyways. Like it didn't matter. So he might as well just kill that dwarf token to make it so that creativity a creativity top deck does not summon the Archon in the first place unless making also has an extra land. So that was a pretty impressive play, and it was pretty interesting to see. At the same time, I think we have seen McKinn's decision to choose to use Leyline Binding early in the game over Ren and 6 to deal with that first wave of threats, punish him pretty hard. He did not end up utilizing this Ren 6 well, right? Yeah, we've only seen him cast right now, but it doesn't matter at this stage of the game.
Do we get Dwarven Mine here to make the dwarf to block the Ragavan?
Most likely.
Only one
Although,
left in the deck.
yeah, that would be the case if McKind is playing the traditional full playset, which I have to guess is the case.
Be a good deck building choice if they were playing for them, I imagine. Brad's the same way he wants to go with Dragon Race Channel. Is it Teferi? Looks like it is. 3 at
Yeah,
Teferi, 8 at face.
at this point, it does make sense to hit the fairy because if you kill the fairy, you still deal 6 damage to Brad, so your threats are lethal next turn if they get through that. You do incentivize your opponent to block your Ragavan, so they lose out on a dwarf, and you get to keep up your Unholy Heat to prevent creativity from producing an Archon of Cruelty. So that was a
Big
pretty
draw
nice
step.
play,
Arid
and
Meza is not it.
not so big, yeah.
We've seen this Dragon Race Channel from the start doing a lot of work, not only being a fly, but where we chose to use the binding to take out the Ragavan. Potentially, if we use that on the Dragon Race Channel, we could then use the Renin 6 to ping. Congrats, Brad, for taking down game number 1. This is your list now on the screen. How or what cards do you think he'll be bringing in to try and shore up this second game so we can go 2-0 in this tournament?
We see a slightly uncommon choice of 2 Force of Negation and Brad's deck. I have to imagine that it's a tool that Brad is going to be looking to use in the matchup. It can help you deploy your threats more freely early in the game while having multiple interaction with more ease against the always threatening creativity. Also lets you tap out for, let's say, Blood Moon if he is gonna look to board that in, which would be my intuition and is a pretty common strategy. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Blood Moon in Brad's deck. Ancient Explosives is an option to fight against specifically the card Creativity. And while it's pretty good at that, it's a little bit on a more risky side, as it is not very effective against the other part of the creativity deck, which is just being a 4-color control deck, right? It's just not really good when all of your threats get Leyline binded or Teferi is getting cast.
Right, well, let's move back down. You've had the expert opinion there of Kanister, what he would do. Let's look at the opening hands. 1 land for Brad here and a lot of blue spells, a lot of blue mana symbols on there. What sort of cards is he wanting in his opening hand?
He certainly is looking for threats to deploy some threats, but the Force of Negations, like, seems like they were brought in and seems like they were drawn, and they're gonna let Brad just play a turn to Ledger Shredder with ease without the fear of tapping out, and that way Brad is gonna be able to fight against that Fable of the Mirror Breaker that is probably going to follow his Ledger Shredder.
And obviously, just like a boss, he ripped the land he was after off the top. Then considers end of turn, pits a lightning bolt in his graveyard, and then draws the island for the turn. So 2 card types in his graveyard right now. Relevant currently, but there is a Dragon Rage Channeler in hand, and we're going to see a Ledger Shredder come down. One of the newer 2 drops that this deck started to play since it's seen since it's been printed. We obviously saw it quite a bit in the Phoenix decks in Pioneer, because it's just a way of turning through your deck, potentially pitting in Phoenix to the graveyard where you want it to be. But in this deck, it's got a few more extra things it can do, right, with Delirium, so to speak, and powering out these Murktides.
Certainly. Ledger Shredder is pretty nice threat. It's a very pleasant card to play with, just conniving all the time. You just get to see lots of cards. You make your threat big. You also just get to sculpt your hand in a way that lets you have all the answers at the correct time. So one of the downsides will be that it's a 2-mana card, so on the draw it's a little bit hard to tap out when your opponent could retaliate with a Fable of the Mirror Breaker or the Fairy Time Raveler, but once again, the Force is going to be real nice here.
I love it. Star Wars references all day. As a spell, Pierce was drawn off the top. I imagine Fable's going to be coming down this turn. Do you like forcing this or not? Are we letting this resolve? Does it matter, or do you think no, we need to stop it? Because
assuredly matters. It would spiral the amount of resources that McKint is able to use. The extra treasures tokens, there's no removal spells in Brad's hand right now, so yeah, he didn't even think to.
I was about to say that was snapped off quicker than we could finish talking about it. Does ditch the Ledger Shredder for the Force of Negation to stop that Fable of the Mirror Break and come down. Some people say it's a bit limited in certain formats that it might be legal in coming tomorrow. Oh no, it's coming Monday, I think, is when the next sort of list of bans comes out. We're going to come across turn this Ledger Shredder sideways, dropping down to 15, and just follow up with a Dragon Rage Channeler and counterspell, multiple counterspell backup if we need it.
One thing to note about the upcoming Monday announcement is that Fable of the Mirror Breaker actually ends up getting banned. That would put it on par with the powerful card Rampaging Ferocidon, which is worth noting.
Do you remember the good old days where we used to have like Wild Nakatl was too powerful for modern? That free for 1 mana? Craziness.
Yeah, that was a solid card.
All right, end of turn. We're going to shock.
It wasn't really.
Hey, look, I'm an aggro player. I'm all about the 1 mana 3/3s. But what I am about is looking at the advantage that these creatures on the battlefield are now generating for Brad Nelson. So not only do we have the Dragon Rage Channeler, we then have a Connive trigger off the Legislator, and then we're going to put another 2 cards from the top of our deck into our graveyard. We kind of get to manipulate what cards are going in and out. I imagine the Thought Scour is targeting ourselves here, not
Sure.
the creativity player.
The funny thing about Thoughtscour targeting McKint would be that McKint could use a Veil of Summer to counter it effectively, as it does target a player, but it actually just targets Brad himself. You can see that
So
McKint just wants to use as many resources as they can, just not sitting on that spell piece forever. It's better to just use it immediately to do something productive with it.
So why is Brad doing this now? Why is he Thought Scouring in his first main phase, opposed to maybe potentially leaving it till next turn or end of turn?
The simple answer is Dragon Rage's Channeler. It had no Delirium, and Brad is just interested in getting Delirium, getting 5 power onto the battlefield, establishing that 3 turn clock while holding up interaction. That is really like all that Brad wants to do in that matchup, and he is in a great position right now. Honestly, the counterspell, the extra mystical dispute, the force of negation backup, just making things pretty safe for him. While all that Mekint can do is cycling.
Well, we've
Try.
got to give it the ability this turn, right, to go creativity, the Dwarven Mine with a Veil of Summer backup. But even that isn't enough because we've got access to both players' hands right now. Double
That
counterspell over
isn't
there for
enough.
Brad Nelson.
And it's also a terrifying play to make, as keeping up a Veil of Summer, sure, it does protect you from counterspell, but you got to have a pretty good read on your opponent having exactly counterspell. If they're holding a removal spell instead, you are opening yourself to a pretty significant blowout by, just an unholy hit targeting your dwarf and with your entire creativity while your Veil of Summer sits there useless. So it's not as simple. It's a tough
And also,
decision on McKinn's part.
this is it's very tricky, right? They got to kind of like, do I die next turn? What if there's a lightning bolt there? Lightning bolt goes face. Can I deal with that? We do have one of the new cards we've just seen printed in March. Is it change the equation? One of like a 2 mana counter spell ish, counts anything 2 or less, or if it's green or red, 6 or less. I believe we've seen this kind of making an appearance in modern. What's your thoughts on that one?
It's a pretty nice card for creativity. Nice pickup. Creativity is very interested in any card that costs just 1 colored mana and lets you spend generic mana on it. Because of course, just looking at the lands that Mekin hasn't played, right? You cannot play counterspell in that deck, even if you might be interested in that type of an effect. And throughout the years, we've seen creativity decks occasionally double into weak, by today's standards, counter spells like mana leaks or remand. Sometimes they use stuff like that. Change the equation seems like a potentially an improvement to those. It does let you interact with many of the most important spells in the format, so it's pretty nice at that.
Okay, big question. Are we going creativity for 2 or are we going creativity for 1 with Veil up? Let's see
We'll
which way
see
the
what
routes to go.
Mekin decides.
Creativity for 1.
All
I
right, so it does
imagine.
put Brad on just counter magic, which is correct. That is what Brad has, but what Brad also has is the force of negation. So
So this Legislator potentially, if this fight does happen, is going to grow twice, right? So it'd be like
yeah,
1 spell, 1 spell, 1 spell, 1 spell. Does that make it a lethal attack next turn? Legislator will grow to a 4.
3, 4,
No.
5, 6, 7. No,
Lightning bolt off the top might do it. Engineer
the
explosives.
explosives. It's an interesting card, but you need to discard it. You need to pitch your force of negation to counter the Veil of Summer, because of course you cannot let an Archon of Cruelty happen right now.
And here is a stack. I love it when stacks happen in Magic. I love it even more when it happens in Magic Online and we can all see what's going on. We've got the Dragon Race challenge. So what we're trying to do here, right, is we're trying to put a non-land card on top because we're going to have to draw it anyway with the Ledger Shredder. We want to ditch it. We want another counter to go on our Ledger Shredder. So we get to manipulate the top of our deck a little bit. It was an iteration. That's going to go to the graveyard. We would have loved to have drawn that for the turn. That card's incredibly powerful when you're in a top deck in battle like this. Big draw step.
Did
What
he
we got?
did he discard iteration?
Yeah, so he only had one card in hand, so he drew it off the Ledger Shredder, had to ditch it from the
Okay.
Ledger Shredder.
I thought he surveyed it away, which probably would be a card I would have kept in my hand, but if it was a choice of surveilling, but
And
here
just
we see
another counter spell off the top. It is not going to be enough. The Flyers are going to be able to come across the top and finish this game off for Brad Nelson. We're just going to, we're going to fetch. We're going to, see what the writing on the wall, and Brad is going to take it down. Remember, he is the bounty this weekend. So anyone managing to beat him will secure themselves an extra $50 on top of anything they've got. And here, welcome back to the virtual booth. My name is Will Hall. That is Kanister MTG. We're going to be taking you through all weekend long in this modern action. 139 players turned up, battling it out. We've got 8 rounds of modern for you today. That halfway through round 2, we're working out if we've got any more backup matches for you all. But that is definitely going to be 6 more rounds and definitely a top 8 tomorrow. So make sure if you haven't hit the follow button, you hit that follow button and you stick around. Go follow ManaTrader on the Twitters. You'll find everything that's going on there. And we do have a backup feature match. So this time we're going to move straight down to it, get the action for you all. And it looks like maybe a Murktide Mirror.
it does appear this way.
So double Dragon Race challenge. Is this how we want to be starting? Seems good to me.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Like, you force your opponent to interact. You do just spend your mana early in the game. You get some damage in if your opponent fails to respawn appropriately quickly enough. So certainly not a bad start. You're much more interested in spending your mana than you are in just not doing that. Although we do see that Kata is just Sky Breach actually presenting a companion. So presumably Giganta and also white mana Breach also is going to be present in the deck. So it's fully a mirror. So that said, Dragon Digest Channeler is actually even better because the way it combines with Underworld Breach is just really strong.
Okay, 3 looks at getting Delirium here. We've got Planeswalker now, land, instant creature. So Delirium will be on when this Lightning Bolt resolves. That is a lot of damage coming across. Potentially lethal next turn. This control drops him to 9, yeah.
Just lethal next turn, you have a Flusterstorm, so you ask your opponent, hey, can you stop it? And Daniel Akos will have to put something into play.
Well, this isn't bad. A Licensed Hearse off the top potentially can turn off Delirium. But we're just going to go for a big old Murktide. You did speak about this. Like, Breach is kind of the backup to this deck. Yes, it's our main thing, but it's actually the backup thing. We can win for these kind of very aggressive aggro draws that we're seeing now. So
yeah, I actually spoke about a slightly different thing because it could have been confusing because of the inclusion of the grinding station combo versus like not playing it. What we see from Casa is the non-grinding station version. It's much closer to a traditional Murktide deck, but oftentimes it's gonna look to win with Underworld Breach for 1, 2, or 3 lightning bolts to finish your opponent off. Also, Dragon Rage's Channeler of just fueling the graveyard so hard.
And they're doing a good job at the minute being able to manipulate the top of the deck. Every spell they cast is going to be able to, potentially put 3 more cards to the bottom, into the graveyard. I imagine they're looking for lightning bolts here.
Yeah, certainly. Bolt or Breach is what you're interested. The DRCs had to attack, so you had to lose one of them attacking into the Murktide Regent.
Okay, so it does look like the Murktide player is up a game, but this game, it could be going to a game 3 pretty quickly. We see that a lightning bolt was the card drawn off that bauble for the turn. We did manage to manipulate the top of our deck. We do have a Flusterstorm for backup, and over on the other side, only 2 land up. So, and we're making them fire first. This is the key bit here, right? They have to act first.
Yeah, you force Daniel Akos to deal with one of the DRCs, and then you just fire off your lightning bolt, and your Fluster Storm will presumably protect it from anything that would stop it from resolving, but That's what we see exactly.
Love to see it. And now we get to go to a game 3. There's nothing wrong with more Magic, especially at this kind of high stakes. Remember, they are playing for $10,000 this weekend in prize money. So everything on the line. Plus, you get the extra little bit of bonus. I suppose I'm going to go on the line and say the extra $50 that Brad potentially could be losing every round is not accounted for. So potentially over $10,000 could be getting played for this
And Brad
weekend.
was able to defend his bounty, and
Yeah.
both the first round against the buy and second round against McKinn. So we'll see how he fares further into the tournament.
Have we got a deck list that we can get up on the screen here while the players are looking around? We'll see if we can get maybe either Murktide or Breach up for you all. Obviously, we've just seen it in the hands of Brad Nelson. He managed to win that one. Yeah, we'll get, we've got Brad's list. We'll put that on the screen. Just give you guys an idea at home. Maybe you're just tuning in. This is the first time you kind of seen Modern or maybe even MTGO. This is a generic, is it Murktide? Obviously, this one's the one that's in the hands of the one and only Brad Nelson. Kai Bormeister's, I don't know if which one's older. I imagine Brad's probably older. He might actually hate me saying that. Okay, I've had it confirmed. Brad is older. So he is the older brother to the person that's normally in the seat that I'm in today, Kai Barmeister. But don't worry, they will be back next month. Him and Ross will be giving you. I think was it Pioneer next month's format. I'm going to wait for Adrian to tell me what that one is. Yep, I've got a yes in my ear. So yep, yes, it is Pioneer next month. So if you do want to play in that, make sure you keep an eye on Mantrays and everything they've got going on, and they'll tell you the date that everything will go live, and you'll give you a couple of weeks to try and qualify. Lots of different ways to qualify. You can either win with 6 wins, 10 wins, 20 games, 30 games, whatever it takes until you get the win percentage you need, and then you get to play in the Swiss like everyone playing today. Okay, this matchup, what sort of cards can be utilized from the Is It Murktide side, or do they have access to normally that would shore up this kind of a matchup against Breach? I imagine something in the graveyard might be a possibility, but this is why we've got you, Kanister.
Old and Ilakos bring 2 copies of Unlicensed Heirs, which is a card that Brad's list does not have access to, the one that we see on screen, but old Danielakos was prepared a little bit more, and Unlicensed Heirs, provided it drops, it gets played early enough in the game, is pretty good at shutting down any of the graveyard synergies that the Breach deck is trying to assemble. So as long as you have the Heirs to contain the graveyard, then you are in a probably better spot going into the late game.
Okay, well, let's go back to the match to see what both players' opening hands will look like. Remember, this is round number 2 still. 8 rounds of action for you today with a cut to top 8, which we'll be playing tomorrow. So if you haven't hit the follow button, make sure you hit that follow button. You do not want to miss this format. Everyone's favorite format, Modern. It is my favorite. I can't lie. I have all of them that are out there. This is one of my go-tos, one of the ones I would claim to, semi-know most about. We were talking before the stream. Obviously, you're a big vintage player, right? You love a bit of vintage.
Oh yeah. That's one of my favorite formats. It's very fun. It's very special. It's very different than most of the things that you usually get to experience in Magic. But looking at the opening hands from players right here, we have seen Casa mulligan to 6. The first hand was just an island, unplayable in the 3-color deck, but he got to mulligan to pretty nice freelander with threats, bolts, and iteration.
Ooh, Blood Moon off the top.
Like not a card that you often see in like a so-called like blue-red mirror, but it is true that Casa's deck is not exactly a blue-red deck. It's a little bit more than that, so it's could be slightly susceptible to Blood Moon. So actually, if Danielakos just drops the moon on the next turn, then that could be it. And Casa is not gonna cast another spell for the duration of the game.
Remember, this is an open deck this tournament, so maybe he's seen that. Maybe he knows there's a bit of a weakness there. Not many basics on the other side of in the other 75. So Blood Moon's maybe a good hedge while he's on the play. We've seen many games come to that where you go turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Blood Moon, and it's just like, oh cool, that was a good game.
Certainly play draw difference plays a role here. A pretty hard decision for old Danielakos in this spot. You have a Scalding Tarn and there is a Ragavan. Ragavan makes treasures when it connects, so it helps you combat Blood Moon a little bit. You could fetch an island to have 2 islands so that you can drop your moon to make sure that your opponent, that Casa doesn't get to fetch any basics before moon comes. At the same time, you do want to bolt the Ragavan before it deals any damage to you. So actually, the Ragavan just played like that was still threatening enough to make old Danilakos virtually unable to play the Blood Moon safely.
Yeah, put them in a really awkward position. Like, do they want to fetch end of turn? If they get an island, which obviously plays into the hand, they can't bolt it, which means they will get a connect. You know, the Ragavan will be able to hit if we went with the Blood Moon. And Ragavan, as we all know, makes treasure tokens. So it kind of counteracts the actual effects of the Blood Moon. But now on the Jeskai side, we managed to draw a fetch land, so they will be able to at least have a basic. And this is kind of what we were talking about with the ups and downs. So, like, it could be a bit of a strange choice at times. Sometimes you'll play it and you're like, that is absolutely next level, big brain thinking. Other times it's going to be like, oh, okay, that didn't really work out how we wanted it to. A
Yeah,
braid?
and interestingly, in a span of 1 turn, the Blood Moon became just from excellent went to, well, I don't even want to play it because Casa will just fetch an island and most of the spells in their deck gonna be just operable, castable, and functional. So
Okay, Ragavan's going to come across here, makes itself a treasure token, removes a flooded strand off the top of the deck, and then it is going to get returned. The dash ability we see quite a lot from this card again makes it so more versatile that not only is it just a one drop that does more than it needs to, it can also do it with haste, potentially pseudo haste. We do have
yeah,
a ledger shredder, but more importantly, there we fetched for a hallowed fountain, not
this
a
is funny.
basic.
Yeah. Just Blood Moon is probably not on Casa's mind at all. Like
There is.
not whatsoever. So
this looks like we're
just
going to go for a okay, this is a weird way of going about it. I thought maybe because we played the land first, we were going to go for a ledger shredder into iteration, but we decided to play the land first into iteration. What's the thinking behind that, or is that just maybe like a little misstep?
not necessarily. It seems pretty intentional to me. You
Okay.
do not want to get your iteration countered by Spell Pierce. It's a very valuable card, so it makes
Okay,
sense
okay.
to play around that. If you go Ledger Shredder into iteration, you do get to trigger your Shredder, Connive, and then have your iteration, but your iteration will get potentially countered by Spell Pierce if you're afraid of that. And on top of that, there is a chance, there's a pretty low chance that you're actually going to hit a Mishra's Bubble, which is the only zero cost card that you can deploy. So just didn't want to risk losing value to a Spell Pierce, is my assumption.
Do you like playing the Blood Moon here?
Yeah, certainly. Well, there's no basics on Casa's side, so you're probably gonna just do that, right?
Blood Moon
Play
comes
Blood
down.
Bowl. And Casa's like, what the heck?
He's
I
like,
can't cast anything in my hand anymore, I guess, besides this unholy heat.
does know about
But
the
it's
Ragavan.
probably gonna be an iteration, yeah.
Such a good card. Like, it just does. It does so much, right? You think originally when it came out and I was playing it, I was like, oh, this card's all right. Like, you cast it on turn 2 and you get a card. It's all right. It does what it says on the tin. Obviously, I was playing it completely wrong, and it is like a turn 3 card onwards. But we've now seen it banned in multiple formats. Modern being the ones it is still legal in though, and a Dragon Age Channeler was found off it as well as the land, and that's going to eat the unholy heat, leaving the Ragavan we know that it's in hand. On the other side of the battlefield, another Dragon Age Channeler is drawn. Essentially, one of
And
the only cards in our deck.
Giganta is actually a nice way to combat Blood Moon. It's castable through Blood Moon with just mountains, and then Giganta can produce uh, all 5 colors of mana. So, funnily enough, Giganta can be a way to beat the Blood Moon.
Okay,
Dragon Rage
consider.
Channeler also an excellent backup.
So consider Unholy Heat drawn off the consider, so we could potentially get rid of the Dragon Age Chandler, attack with the Ragavan, and play the Hearse this turn. I don't know
Yeah,
what,
that's.
like, without getting the graveyard up. I don't know if we'll be able to actually shrink these Dragon Age Chandlers or not, but could be
Let me see.
quite a good turn.
There's artifacts.
There you go, getting it
Artifact
up on the screen for you.
land. sorcery instance, so you are not able to take Delirium off with just a single activation, but you can target the Mishra's Bubble and a land and then take Delirium away on the
Well, there's only
next
one
turn.
sorcery, right? We could go Mistress Bauble sorcery, leaving instant
There's
creature
indeed just
lands.
one sorcery, yeah. That's a good catch. So that actually does take away Delirium. That seems pretty good.
That's pretty good. So again, on the other side of the battlefield, and then unlicensed Hearse is drawn. We do still have one Dragon Rage Chandler, so we get the ability to manipulate the top of our deck, but maybe turn on Delirium again for ourselves. We are looking for a sorcery and artifact. It looks like it was just a land that got pushed to the graveyard. We could have utilized that to play Giganta, perhaps.
It's a bit tricky, yeah. You could draw an extra land to play Giganta. You could also you really value every single surveil that you get because it gets you closer towards Island, which is like the truly broken draw right now, truly the draw that you are looking for. There's probably just one island in Casa's deck, maybe two.
I think
So
I
not
missed something here. So the Ragavan got blocked, and then we shrank down the Legislature. So we've kept the Unholy Heat in hand.
yes.
I
That was probably because all the Galacos knew that Giganta is coming, right? So
okay. So
knowing that Giganta is coming, you are incentivized to keep your unholy heat to answer it.
okay, interesting. See how that pans out. We still got the Unholy Heat. We drew one for the turn, so we're going to use one. Get that Legislature off the wrong. Gets the Darcy off the battlefield, so it can stop doing its survey triggers and filling up the graveyard. Because as much as everything is still red, the life total is only 11, and something like what we were speaking about, a breach potentially could throw a lot of damage to the face.
Yeah,
Maybe not
breach
for
is not
not for
so
a Hearst,
not
but
so potent against the hairs. Yeah, all the good spells are gonna be exiled in response, so you're gonna be left with not too many options.
we're off the top. And also, we got to remember that these Hearsts can be crewed if a creature comes down and they're big enough.
Yeah, for example, Giganta the Wellspring.
Hmm.
But more importantly, we should take a look at Old Danielako's graveyard and check for Delirium in there. We see artifact, creature, land, instant, but there is only one instant and one artifact. So Delirium is fragile, and uh, the Unholy Heat cannot hit Giganta.
So
What
we're
all the Danielakos can do is Otawara the hairs and then in response hit the Giganta because Casa did not choose to use the hairs immediately. So that's actually pretty big punishment. Getting rid of the Giganta might as well be game deciding. That was like Casa's most consistent way to engage back into the game, letting Casa gain access to blue mana or just a 5/5 monster.
yeah, that's a big swing. And then a Ragavan off the top. Do you like crewing here, or do you like connecting with it?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's probably connecting because you can just hit a card, and you know how pleasurable it is to just hit someone with a Ragavan. Like you get to excel an island.
And they
See?
rip the island off the top. Ah,
Yeah.
just to rub salt in the wound there. Lightning bolt drawn for the turn though, so at least now we have an answer for that Ragavan if it does decide to come down. Jeez,
But yeah,
this is
there is little point in crewing the hairs when it was not a 2 turn clock yet. So you could just dash Ragavan, grow the hairs, and then use the hairs once it's actually lethal, or on the upcoming turn to get rid of half of Cass's life total and then strike again.
yeah. You must imagine end of turn here as we see we're going to exile another 2 cards. That means there's 8 cards under it. It would be an 8/8 if it was to be crewed. But in response, we're going to exile the cards ourselves with our own and unlicensed Hearst, not to, so the other one doesn't grow as big. Spell Pierce off the top, not too good in the later game, but it might become relevant. We'll see how that one works.
Pretty hard for it to be relevant at this point, but certainly can connive it away later in the game if a Ledger Shredder gets deployed or something like that could happen.
So we're just going to eat 2 things now while the Hearst is out. So now we've got this kind of like back and forth battle with unlicensed Hearsts, right? And I feel like we're on the plan of we're just going to wait until this unlicensed Hearst is a one-shot kill.
Yeah, it seems like that would be the plan.
Oh, Dragon Rage channel off the top. Probably a 1/1 still. No, it's still a 3/3. They're looking at have a
There's
little look at Delirium.
and an instance. So You could take away the Delirium. With the way it's been played, you can actually crew the Hearse, which might be fatal for Casa. Hearse is gonna attack for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 damage now. And
I,
next turn, it's gonna get crewed again by Ragavan Nimble Pilferer
I
for
actually
the
really like that. That's a really nice big brain player, like working out. Like a lot of players will just be dashing Ragavans here and hoping to connect to with a one-off. But there you're able to, they've set up potentially, yeah, cool. If you've got a removal spell or a way to shrink my Dragon Rage Chandler, I can still play my Ragavan next turn and crew in response to a removal spell. Breach off the top, not very good when you don't really have a good graveyard. But congratulations. We see Murktide take it down every game this round. Welcome back to the booth, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Will Hall, better known on the internet as the Will Hall EXP, and I am joined by someone that some people would say is an absolute hero and it had a really super impactful, important person in Magic history. That they cleared the path to save Magic during the pandemic and had a huge number of content folks that would not be here without them. Of course, it is the one and only Kanister MTG, and we are taking you through this modern action this weekend.
possible that people say that, yes, but
A lot of
nonetheless, the
people do
matches that
say
we've
that. A lot
seen,
of people do say that.
a lot of people do, yeah. But the matches that we've seen were fairly, very interesting.
They
Pretty
were. They were.
many key decisions that were taken by both players that decided the outcome of the game. Certainly, things could have broken a different way with different approaches from both players. So it was pretty cool to follow and see those game plans unfold in real time.
Yeah, I like the back and forth Hearst. So, I mean, like you're going to exile them, right? I'm going to use my Hearst to exile them. Very back and forth, very good Magic, but like a lot of the same cards in both decks, just two different synergies for them. We're going to see if we've got another backup match. We're going to see if Adrian's got one. I'm getting a hum in my ear, so we might have one, we might not have one. We'll get back to you now, but let's talk more about that game. So, key cards, unlicensed Hearst, kind of the go-to graveyard hate that blue-red decks have because they don't really have endurances and ley lines and things like that. Rest in pieces to bringing in. Also, it's not great because they're also graveyard synergy decks, so you don't want to fully, nuke both graveyards or so. Rest in peace. So they choose to go with Hearst, one that's been printed in the last 12 months or so. So pretty powerful card. Why did they decide to go with that one opposed to Spell Bombs or something?
But for blue red, exactly, you don't really have many more options that are just one graveyard specific. You could go with maybe Tomod Script, Soulgate Lantern, this type of an effect, but just Unlicensed Heirs is more permanent. It stays there, it chips at the graveyard until it gets removed, and then also it has the duality of being a nice threat
An
once
8/8
all
when you need to finish and close out a game.
yeah. As we've seen, this game just like an 8/8 Hertz was what dealt the final damages. So there is
Exactly.
a nice aspect of the card.
Okay, I'm being told we do have another match for you all, so we're going to see if we can move down that. We're going to move down to that one. But at least we get to see who wins. It looks like the I don't even know what deck that is. It's some sort of artifact deck. But congratulations, that player managed to take that one down. I'm going to go on a limb and say that's probably the end of the round, is it? Okay, cool. So on that one, that is going to be the end of that round for us. So make sure you stick around. We'll be back super shortly, just while the players finish this round. We kind of pick the next feature match, etc. Remember, we do have Brad Nelson. He is the bounty at the minute. If someone manages to beat him, they will win an extra $50 plus whatever they're going to get if they're in the top 8. So we've got 8 rounds, 6 more after. So make sure you stick around, and we'll be back super shortly. See you soon. Welcome back to the Mad Trace series, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Will Hall. That is Kanister MTG, and we are taking you through the modern rounds today in the series. There was obviously 8 rounds. We just had 2 of them. We've got 6 more to come. But to start off with, we're going to talk what is everyone playing for? How did they get here? Let's see if we can get the graphic up on the screen, what they're playing for today in the Swiss. So, first goal in like every Magic tournament we ever play is you want to hit that top 8. But in this one, you need to hit the top 32 to be able to get some sort of prizes to walk away from. Obviously, anybody can play in these tournaments. You do not have to be a Mad Chase subscribers, but if you do, you get a 10 times bonus on the money that you win. So if you come first place, you get yourself $300. No, you get yourself $3,000. Not bad for a weekend's work. And that goes all the way down to a little bit of credit there for, 17th down to 32. But we do need to talk about this thing you see down the right of your screen, December Finals Invitation. So this is a $25,000 tournament that people get to take part in. It is free, but you do need to qualify for it. The top two in the top 8 tomorrow will automatically get invites. And this happens every month. So if you come first or second in the Mad Trader series, depending on what month it is and what format, you get an invite to it. There's only going to be 48 people playing at the end of the year in this event. So very prestigious to play in. That's the prizes for it. But there's also another way that you can get into this. There is a Swiss. Everyone had to qualify for the tournament this weekend through Swiss rounds. They had to play X amount of games and finish with a win percentage of 65, 60, 70, 55 or 50% to qualify to play in this. And then at the end of that, there is obviously a ranking. We've got a top 8 players, and whoever wins that gets to win themselves a little bit of extra money. We're going to put that on the screen for you now. This is the other one. Okay, this is the points. So they get points playing in this weekend. So the points system, this is the extra way to qualify. So you can either come first and second in the monthly event, first and second in the Swiss to qualify for the monthly event, or do well in a number of tournaments to earn yourself the amount of points. If you come in third place, you get yourself 8 points. Fourth gets 7 points, 6, 5, 4, 3. You understand? And this is what you see on the screen here. These players, if we stop the count right now, these 8 players are the ones that are going to be able to fill the last 8 slots at the end of the year and get themselves an invite. What's the deal breaker here? Why does it say appearances? Well, if we've got 2 players there on 8 points, like you see, if we stop the count now, the person with the most appearances, that's the tiebreaker. So if you played in more of these Mad Trader events, but you're on equal points to someone else in that top 8, you will get priority. So for a free tournament that you can play sat at home on MTGO, why would you not want to qualify for this and have your chance at winning the best part of $25,000? But let's see what players did turn up this weekend. Who is trying to get in that end of year event? We have got players to watch. Let's get them up on the screen. Some of you will notice if you're an MTGO grinder. Some you might not be. Obviously, these are the names on Modo. Kanister, talk me through this. Which players are standing out to you?
We'll see, of course, the 2-0 player just standing out the most from the pack. Twinless Twin, a very well-esteemed Merktide player, very strong player with a pretty solid start in the tournament. So far, I believe he is playing a list similar or even the same list as Brad Nelson, who, yeah, exactly the same list. They are playing the same deck that they presumably work together on.
Yeah, I believe there's a Discord with like Pygonti and people like that. That obviously they're kind of the generic blue-red players in on Modo.
Exactly.
So they have their own little group, and I think that's the list that they've come to terms with.
So far with a good start. Some of the older players on the list have a little bit of a rougher landing in the tournament so far, and they will need to fight a little bit harder to stay in competition for a top 8, but certainly not crossing anyone out just yet.
No, but we do have one other player that is not on this list who is 2-0 and is obviously famous for being the brother of the one and only Kai Ballmeister, Mr. Brad Nelson himself. He is this month's bounty. There is a bounty every month. It is going to be an MTG personality. Obviously, we decided to go with Kai's brother in this one. That's how Brad became famous. And he is the bounty. If you beat him in the Swiss or the top 8, if you manage to get that far, you will win yourself an extra $50. Not bad, because then you get to say you also get the bragging rights. I remember a couple of years ago, I think someone wrote on a PT top 8 sort of script that they put. What was your biggest achievement? And they literally put beating Brad Nelson, and Brad Nelson was like, "What? Like you beat me on MTG?" It is quite a good achievement. But moving
Those
down
are
to
always a sort of very, very funny comments.
the
Those top 8 sheets.
They do have some classic ones on there, but this is another classic one. A deck that we're seeing do very popular in Pioneer right now, but with a few extra modern sprinkles in there, is the deck at the top of your screen here. I don't even know what we're going to call this. It is kind of like a Convoke deck. Well, it is a Convoke deck.
It is a Convoke deck for sure. Yeah, that's
Do you want to
how
talk people through this
I would
one? What sort of
describe it.
cards are we going to be seeing in this deck? Like, what's the big hitters, and why is this deck all of a sudden really popular or we're seeing a lot of it in Pioneer. Why is maybe it's strong enough for Modern? It is 2-0 currently.
Well, it's really popular in Pioneer because it's fairly strong and very explosive for Pioneer. In Modern, of course, the power level of the format is much greater, so the decks need to be just much more than they are in just Pioneer. But there's many cards that are very nice improvements to the strategy. What brought this deck into existence in Pioneer was both the printing of Knight Errant of Eos in March of the Machine, but also in the previous set, Gleeful Demolition, basically a variant of Kuldotha Rebirth, an old all-star. If you are a Pauper player, you're certainly familiar with that card. So nowadays, the modern version gains access to as many as 8 copies of essentially Kuldotha Rebirths on top of just a full playset of Ornithopters and Memnites. That means that the deck is just much more consistent than it is in its Pioneer incarnation. So while Modern is a more powerful format, we are still going to see this deck probably do a lot.
But like on paper, right, it literally looks like I've got one person on the other side that's playing $50 one drops, and person on the other side is playing 5 cents one drops. Like Favor and the Spectre, I don't know if it's even in the top 10 one drops of all time. Probably not. But then it just looks like a pile of cards that they aren't generically going to do too much. Obviously, we know it's got the ability to have a super explosive turn. And this is an open deck, this tournament. So, getting paired against this, maybe you've not seen it before. Maybe you think you know how it works, but you've not played it. So you're not completely, what are the key parts, key cards you need to kind of fight against here. Where on the other side, it looks like we've got Rakdos mid-range, Rakdos Scam, however you want to go about it, with powerful cards like Dragon Rage Chandler,
It
Bagavan.
seems to be actually just a mid-range deck, as many of the cards are not pretty atypical for Scam. I guess mostly Dragon Rage's Channeler.
Okay.
It's pretty seems like a mid-range deck because of that. Although I'm not exactly sure.
But we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. It could be the one with Dorothy Voidwalker and Cruxes and things like that, right?
Exactly. The tough decision, though, for the mid-range player right now is deciding whether to play a Thoughtseize or play a one-drop creature. It's very attractive to play Ragavan or DRC on the first turn of the game to start getting those damages in, but instead we see that against a Mulgan 2/5, they chose to go with a Thoughtseize, and they're going to be heavily rewarded for that, probably taking away that Gleeful Demolition, which means that Knight Errant of Eos is not castable in the immediate sense.
Okay, so we do see drawn for the turn there. Obviously, we've seen this popular in a couple of niche formats. Comes in, does a pointed damage, makes itself a blood token. Not particularly strong in Modern. I'm going to go out there and throw it, but very good in these kind of like synergistic
That
decks
is
in
fair.
Pioneer.
That is fair. It's certainly like a card that just shows the power of producing game objects, right? You play a useless creature for the most part, but it's still a creature, right? So it does have all the synergies that you could ever want from just a creature existing, and at the same time, it's also a crazy token that you can use in various ways.
And we're going to see here just a powerful turn of Dragon Rage Chandler into Thoughtseize. We take out the
Thoughtseize was
Eons
pretty
and
brutal. Pretty brutal Thoughtseize because certainly we were banking on that Knight Errant of Eos being convoked on this turn to bring us back into the game. Without it, it's going to be much harder to win.
we still got this Ornith option in hand. Why are we keeping this in hand, so to speak? Like, obviously, it doesn't do too much. It is just a 0/2 flyer. In this deck, it's very synergistic, but we've kept it in our hand up to now. What's the reason behind that? Potentially, maybe get rid of with the blood token, or just waiting for a turn to do what we've just seen there and pick 3/1s on the battlefield.
There just isn't much reason to play it in the first place. But as you said, blood token is a good reason to keep your Ornithopter in your hand for a little bit longer. Also, the deck contains 4 copies of Clarion Spirit, which rewards you for playing your second spell each turn. So following up your Clarion Spirit with an Ornithopter is just a way to guarantee that you will produce a spirit. So
we did say
that's all good.
Rakdos mid range, but a green card has just been drawn.
Mm.
traverse the underworld. It's making me think this might be like a Death Shadow list potentially. Like I'm trying. What other cards? What other decks are playing traverse?
It
I'm
is a
being
Death
told in my
Shadow
ear,
deck.
it is Death Shadow. Makes me feel super big brain. I'm not gonna lie.
I like
So
how it has been concealed for a whole 2 turns of the game up until this Traversi Uldenwald has showed up.
So we've got the option here. Obviously, we've got Fatal Push. That's an instant speed into our graveyard if we want it. If we can pick one more card type in the graveyard, the Dragon Range Channel will grow to a 3/3 and be a good blocker here. That gives the game away that the Stomping Grounds is going to come into play tapped. So just talk me through that interaction. This is quite a thing that some people might do and not realize that they're doing it. Why did we fetch first and then potentially play the Fatal Push?
Well, there are many reasons for doing that depending on the situation. In this exact one, you are just looking to surveil with your Dragon Rage's Channeler. You know you will not use your Stomping Ground mana on this turn, so you can just fetch it because you'd like to anyways, end of turn, and you just get to keep a card on top of your deck if you like it, and you don't have to reshuffle it with your fetch land later on
And we're
with
going to
the
see.
Channeler Surveil.
Yep, and it does manage to put a bauble in the graveyard, making it a 3/3, giving it good block. We're also going to throw this Ragavan under the bus, prevent a little bit more damage. But now we've got Traverse, we can go and get ourselves a Death Shadow off the top.
Yeah, Death Shadow is fairly nice. It's pretty
We could
big
get a
creature.
land.
We could
Like,
get a land. There just doesn't seem to be much benefit for doing that, so instead we are going with the Death Shadow, which does make sense to me.
a 1 mana 7/7, is that good in any
I would
format?
say so.
Yeah,
I would
I'd
say
agree with
so.
you on that. But 6 life is the life total. Can we get over the hurdle? Not by
Uh,
drawing double Bloodstained Mire,
two
we can't.
two Blasting Mire is pretty hard. What you would need to join this spot is Goblin Bushwalker, I assume. That way you could go on top there, Bushwalker. It's still not
Ah,
possible, so
maybe that's why we're keeping the Ornithopter in hand, to be able to get a trigger for the Bushwhacker later on if we manage to do top deck it.
you could, but the Bushwalker that we see in Lohaller's deck is actually the OG Goblin Bushwalker, the version with Kicker from the original Zendikar set, which does not require you to cast a different spell like the off of the Gatewatch version that is played in Pioneer. So that is not a concern.
Understood. We probably will have a Cycle of the Blood token end of turn, or we've got the option to crack a canopy if we need to. 5 life on the other side. I suppose one good thing about this deck is Team of Battle Rage is not played too much in Modern anymore. That would be a card they definitely wouldn't want to be able to see. But while that's not, a lot of these are 1/1 blockers can just chump block this huge Death Shadow on the other side.
Do you remember when people used to play Traverse Death Shadow decks and they had a singleton
Rampager.
or an Rampager to fetch with the Traverse Ulvenwald for the trample damage? Those were the times for sure.
I love that. I love it. The thing is, when I started playing like the guilds kind of era, that was one of the cards I used to love playing with. So yeah, I've got a soft spot in my heart for it. As we're going to see the Inquisition cast, obviously just sees the Bloodstained Mire in the other hand. Double attack is interesting.
It's pretty free. You should attack with a Death Shadow because it forces a champ block, so why not, right? Just like if you stay back, then the best the shadow is gonna do is gonna eat one attacking creature. So if you force a blocking creature to attack into your Death Shadow, then it's mostly beneficial.
Okay, we've still got an out here, right? If we can draw a Bushwhacker effect, which
Yeah,
we don't,
well,
Loxodon's not exactly what we want to be doing.
but we still got one redraw with the Sunbake Canyon. We can still get the Bushwalker, I believe. That
Yes, you're
would
right. We
be
can.
8 damage, two of which can get blocked, and that puts bench.
But even a lightning bolt, if we got lightning bolts in this deck, no, we do not.
There's
But
no
no,
lightning bolt in the deck.
just all draft cards basically in this deck.
Like a different play has been chosen. Venerated Loxodon,
Okay.
interestingly. Convoking this
Interesting to
one monster.
see how this pans out for him. We might have an upkeep terminate here to try and manipulate the top of our deck using the survey. That's, something we do see quite a lot because we're looking for 1 point of damage here, right?
Yeah.
So they're
So
going to have to
something
go
like
chump chump.
lightning bolt.
Stomping ground is
Ground,
not it.
not quite it, but it does force 2 chum blocks.
Now, does this give us any outs? I think this turns off. I suppose we've got redraws. The redraws do give us more outs, right?
Well, you can still get the bushwalker, right? It's
Okay.
exactly 5 damage.
Halo Hopper, not one you commonly see in modern or even draft, but it is a 3/2 of Convoke for 3 mana. We're going to see if we can get that deck list up on the screen for you all, so we can kind of talk through this deck. It is quite an interesting one. It is one that I definitely think we'll be commentating on it this weekend.
Well, would you say that Halo Hopper is a 3/2 for 3 or a 3/2 for free?
I love it. I love it. That is literally the reason why you should always and never stop being a content creator, is for these puns. Like it just makes everybody's life more happy hearing you say things like that. We managed to get it up on the screen for you, so you can have a good look at this. And I'm going to leave it to Kanister to try and break this one down and kind of talk us through one, what sideboard cards are going to be good in this matchup, if any, and two, I will see if we can make some more puns about any of these cards.
Well, there's not much that comes to mind. Stay in the mind. Not very good in the matchup. You're not into that. Tranef Magistrate is for the Cascade decks. Werte for Uza Sagas or Hammer decks, so you're not interested in that. You could use Burnt on Forged Tender, but against a Jan deck like that, they will have some red removal, but it's not particularly excellent. So we might see either the Burrington Forge Standards come in, swap for some amount of maybe Hollow Hoppers or Clarence Spirits, or we could see no sideboarding at all. That seems just as viable to me. The core game plan is going to remain the same and still pretty similar to the core game plan of the Pioneer version. Play Memnite, Inspector, Epicure, or Ornithopter, use Demolition or Kulbafari Birth to create free tokens, convoke out one of your big payoffs, that being Knight Errant of Eos, Venerated Loxodon, or in most extreme cases, Hollow Hopper, I guess, and try to ride that to victory. But yeah, in the previous game that we've seen, that plan was stopped pretty early by a Mulligan to 5 and then a follow-up Thoughtseize.
Well, double Thoughtseize, right? With threat, and yeah, it's one of the disadvantages of that. This deck does seem like it needs a critical mass to be able to fully turn the gears and go off. And we see the opening hand here. We've got a couple of land, couple of cheap creatures, plus a Knight of Eos to kind of bump our creatures up to a more formidable size, let's say. And over on the other side, we do see engineered explosives. I imagine out of the sideboard.
Explosives, not a card that exists in Pioneer, but a card that seems to pose a humongous problem for this deck in Modern. There is an extra Kuldafari Birth effects, there's extra Ornithopters and Memnites, so there is even more zero drops that get countered by Engineered Explosives pretty hard, so certainly something that we might see come into play this much.
No second land drop, second engineering explosive drawn for the turn. We've also got Tarfire. This is one that you see, it pops up occasionally. It makes sense in a deck with things like Tarmogoyf and Dragon Race Chandler. It does count as 2 card types. We don't really see tribal too much just in general in Magic anymore, but it does have those that keyword in it. I don't even know how big Tarmogoyfs can get potentially. Now, how many card types? Is it like an 8-9 now, Tarmogoyf? Could in Dreamland be?
9-10 is possible nowadays.
9-10.
Yeah, that is because in much of the machine, a new card type, Battle, has been released. It's not very common and constructed, especially in Modern, at least for now. But you can dream, and you can build a 9-10 Tarmogoyf right now, technically.
Dreaming is what we are doing. Registering this deck. Shout out to Lahula, who bought this deck. This super explosive Convoke deck. Let's see if it pays off for them. See if they can get potentially a big turn 2 here. And
What
how
I'm
they
surprised about is how Bench Summer decided not to follow up the Dragon Rage's channel with an engineered explosives. That could have been a good way to increase the chance that you will find your second land immediately by getting an extra surveil, but seems like Bench Summer doesn't really care about that and values the secrecy of the engine explosives much higher than just a measly extra chance at a second land.
trying to get him out. Obviously, Bench Summer recently, I believe, won an RC, qualified themselves for the last Pro Tour that you were at. Obviously, formidable Death Shadow player. They've been playing this sort of type of deck for years upon years and done really good results with it. So expect no less this weekend from them, as this Fortsies is going to come across, pit Ragavan in the graveyard off the Surveil, and they're going to see the hand of 2 Knights of Eos and a Bloodstained Mire. I don't need your expert opinion for this one. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say they're going to take the Knight and put it in the graveyard. You're welcome, chat. You're welcome. I'm here all
The
weekend.
second Knight, though, really important actually, right? Really big card to have. Just makes the Fotsies much less of a threat because Lawhaller will still get to do the thing on the next turn. So might
Now we are
be
casting the EE.
end of turn blood discard Blasting Mire possibly. Maybe yes, maybe not. It's actually not fully clear to me if that's a great play. So let's see what Lawhaller decides to do.
And you do think like, this card's just it is like a 1-mana 1/1, pings a little bit, makes a blood token, but that blood token late game, it kind of gives you late game, right? Opposed to instead of being all in, potentially you can draw a few more cards or cycle away the bad ones. As we're going to see a Knight come down here, use its ability. I believe this one's the one that we get to look at the top of our deck and kind of pseudo pit some cards into our hand.
Exactly. We look at 6 cards and we get to grab 2 creatures with a mana value as high or lower than the amount of creatures that convoked Knight Errant of Eos. So we see Burnt on Forged Render indeed sideboarded into the deck, despite my doubts. And
then Clarion Spirit. Talk us through that one. Again, not another card that we tend to see in Modern.
Yeah, it's also a card that people are toying with in the Pioneer versions of this deck. And certainly it's much better in Modern with how many more 0 drops you get to play. It's just much more consistent that you will trigger your Clarion Spirit immediately after you play a creature, so it's much closer to just like a raise the alarm effect effectively while also demanding removal than it is in Pioneer, where it is that's inconsistent at times at actually producing extra bodies.
And we do see Memnite drawn for the turn. Not exactly the most powerful draw from the deck, but that's what you take. You are very going to be an all-in deck here. 13 life, quite crucial. As a Death Shadow, you don't really want them to drop below 13 because then they can start deploying the namesake card of their deck, a Death Shadow. And it looks like
of course, like you do want them to drop generally, right?
Well, yeah, I don't think they can win the game if they don't actually can do exactly 12, it's one, not 12, 20 points of life damage. And that's a nice play there. I like that. Holding up the Tarfai, knowing that your Dragon Rage Channel is going to be able to be a 3/3 for this block. And now we're going to get to like kind of almost refill the board with a flurry of 1/1s as they come down. And I suppose one of them is a 2/2, keeping the Memnite in hand for potentially next turn be able to cast it as a second spell if we need to, if the spirit does live.
Yeah, also explosives does not incentivize you to run out all of your zero drops, so makes sense.
There's the second land for him. Very crucial here. Only at 8 life. Some sort of bushwhacker effect, something like that. It must be what Bench must be pretty scared of going forward.
Certainly,
and the Dragon Age Channel's got to attack.
One of the stronger things to draw right now.
So let's have a little.
Probably going to see
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I think a bushwhacker effect will do this. But we do have Fatal Push and Death Shadow if need be, or Unholy Heat, depending on which way you want to go. Depends if I imagine a basic gets fetched up here. There it
Base
is.
swamp, yeah.
So, turn on, but then on the flip side, you've got to make sure that you don't die on the backswing because there's a good chance this Death Shadow is going to live one way or another. And 11 life points on the other side. Draw for the turn. Second Spirit. So, I imagine these work great in multiples, but the first one might not live so much.
Yeah, certainly not a card that works better in multiples, and Clarence Spirit into Memnite is going to produce more extra spirit tokens. They're not that useful in the face of engineered explosives, but let's see. We can't quite attack with all creatures. We deal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage, so that is lower than we would have wanted to. It does put Bench Summer at 2 life, but still leaves Bench Summer with plenty of options. And you do sacrifice Knight Errant to make such an attack, so you probably instead are going to go with Clarence Spirit into Memnite.
Okay, bench decides not to fire off, the fatal push here. So we do get some Memnite. We do get the extra triggers. Do make a couple of extra 1/1s. Remember, we do have the E on the battlefield on 0 if needs be. That'll be able to get rid of a couple. Or will we get rid of all the tokens plus the Memnite? But I don't think that's enough. If a Bushwhacker effect does come down, do we? I'm pretty sure we've got to fire off a removal spell end of turn here, right?
Almost assuredly, yeah. A Bushwhacker effect is gonna be still good enough, so that is scary. Unless you draw a Painless Land or a Fetch Land for another copy of a basic, which I'm not sure how many basics are there in Bench Summer's deck. I cannot imagine it's too many, being a Death Shadow deck.
I'm gonna have a little look, but yeah, genuinely they only tend to play one. 2. I'm getting told that there is a forest also in the
Alright.
deck.
So yeah, that does make sense. So you probably have to fire a removal spell on the Clarence Spirit end of turn. You're virtually locked into using explosives, I believe. No other way.
I've got to use fatal push, right? Because if we use the unholy heat, potentially they could sack the forge tender to prevent the damage.
Exactly, you're probably looking to use your fatal push instead to make sure that is not an issue. You could also fatal push the Burrenton Forge Tender to cut off your opponent's future options against your unholy heat. So I have to imagine that is one of the things that goes through the mind of Bench Summer right now, as we see the decision being made.
Yeah, I've already spoke about the top level player they are. They're obviously going through all the calculations in their head. Well, if I do this and they draw that, well, what could I possibly draw to get myself out of this, etc. A lot going on, and it looks like we are going to go with the unholy heat.
All
Unclear what
right,
we're targeting.
giving Lohaler the option to interact with Unholy Hit via Burrenton Forge Tender right now, in favor of having more options with your own fatal push later in the game. It does make sense.
Stomping ground was drawn for the
Yeah.
turn. So let's do some math together, right? So we play that, we drop to 4. If it comes into play untapped, that leaves us engine explosives that can get rid of all the tokens and the Memnites, leaving just 2 spirits and the forge tender, and then we have a fatal push in hand. So we're not dead, to the board at least.
Yeah. Also, interestingly, the Unholy Heat has hit the Knight Errant of Eos. That was the choice of a target last turn by Bench Summer, and that was also a card that Lol Haller chose not to protect against, with Burrenton Forge Tender valuing the Forge Tender higher than the 5 mana 4/4, interestingly.
I was just about to ask you this question, but Bench just answered for me. It's like, do you fire off this now so potentially they can't block the Dragon's Channel? So you're definitely getting these 3 points across. Looks like
Seems
you
like
decided to
you
go
do.
with it. But the flip side to this is the Stomping Ground in hand now. Obviously, Stomping Ground, blue and green, cannot cast the Fatal Push that's in hand. So that's probably just going to come into play tap. So we're respecting our own life total pretty greatly here.
Certainly, you're looking for any ways to save life points. You don't want to bleed for no reason.
This is interesting though.
Yeah, we see EE. A card was kept on top. Didn't quite catch what was the surveil. But what do we see from Lohaler? Unfortunately, it's just a Bloodstained Mire, not a particularly excellent top deck.
Another Knight of Eos here, but we would have to tap out for the turn. Potentially, if we manage to hit another 0-mana creature, we could cast that, get 2 triggers for our spirit tokens, but we know that E is on the battlefield to clear them up. This is this might be falling away from.
You probably do cast Knight Errant of Eos. I have to assume, right? You just tap 2 lands and 3 creatures, play it. If you get to block with your Knight Errant, then you do survive. If your opponent has an Unholy Heat for your Knight Errant, you get to protect yourself with the Burnt-on Forge Tender. It does leave you with the question of what comes next turn, and that is rather unclear. If you champ block the Knight Errant after the Death Shadow has attacked, it does not leave you in the most favorable position with just 2 Clarence Spirits and 1 Burnt-on Forge Tender. It's not even enough to deal lethal damage in 1 swing, so
Close though. Both these players, obviously, 6 life to 7 life. We see this a lot with Death Shadow. They kind of like, dance of death a little bit. And yeah, we're just scooping it up. We're just gonna give the bench that win there. He's gonna be able to take it down. So congratulations to him managing to advance his record this weekend. Welcome back to the virtual booth, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Will Hall. That is obviously Kanister MTG, and we are bringing you modern action all weekend long. 139 players are playing this event. The format is modern, and we've got 6 more rounds left. Well, we're halfway through one of them, so potentially 5 full rounds, and this one. We're just going to see if we can queue up a backup feature match for you all. But looking at that, I don't think we were dead on board there. Maybe that was a bit of an early concession. Well, where'd you stand on that one, or do you think they just got no line in their head that they could work out to actually get back into that game?
yeah, to me it did seem like there is still a game to be played, so I'm not entirely sure what the thought process was there, but it is possible that despite my high level analysis of the game, I have missed on to something, of course, used similarly.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Nothing goes past Canister's head. He is too quick. You're basically like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy in that aspect, right? I got it. Adrian got it. Everyone got it. It's fine. It's fine. I laugh at my own jokes. That's why I'm here, ladies and gentlemen. So it does look like I think we've got a backup feature match, and we'll. Okay, we're trying to find a good feature. So we do have them coming. So it is round, but you know what I mean? Stick around. We are going to be able to bring that to you. And plus, you got my beautiful jokes, Canister's lovely puns. It's basically a match made in heaven. Why would you want to watch anything else? Also, on top of that, I suppose there's a bit of magic to be played. Do we know how Brad Nelson's getting on? If he's won or not? He lost. Okay. So Brad Nelson managed to pick up his first defeat this round, giving a nice crisp $50 to the person that managed to take that victory on him. That obviously wouldn't happen to Corey. Corey doesn't lose. That's why Brad is the least famous brother of the two, and does get the not as much credit for his magic skill as his brother. So congratulations on an extra $50. Remember, this is a free tournament. Anybody can be playing in this tournament, and 139 people did manage to queue for it. The system that you kind of it's implemented for this is you sign up to Mana Traders, and then you take part in their events. It's in the casual sort of format, so you play that, and all you need to do is get a winning record. If that's over 6 games, 10, 20, or 30, you need to qualify for this weekend, and then you get to play in the Swiss like the rest of these players here. Looks like we found our backup feature match. We've seen this deck before, Murktide. We saw them win last round, and they are up against, I'm going to go out on a limb and say blue-white control. Yes, because it says UW control on the board. That is right. How does this kind of pan out normally? Is this a good or bad matchup for Murktide?
It is certainly a hotly disputed topic. Blue-white players will tell you that they feel very favored, but that's oftentimes the case. While Murktide players can certainly navigate a lot of games into tough spots for blue-white and can take advantage of lots of stuff. So I would say it's pretty close, probably slightly Murktide unfavored. We see a Chalice of the Void in
I like the
in
Supreme
hand.
Verdict versus Counterspell here. Obviously they've played their
Yeah,
2 threats, thinking they're able to hold up this counter magic for anything that can deal with it. They might be able to
pretty
fire it
much.
off here actually on the Memory Deluge. Not a bad target.
Not a
We
bad
do see
target,
that
but
happen.
also it's pretty good. Like you already gotten your value from your memory deluge, presumably. So getting to bait out a counter spell with your essentially free roll flashback spell is very potent, and you get to play a Chalice of the Void, Supreme Verdict, all the creatures. And I guess it's pretty F for your opponent right now, right? We see
Yeah,
Magus of the Moon, not gonna impede too much from the mana base here. 2 planes for islands, just like easily playable through Blood Moon.
and they still got quite a high life total, 16 life here, so it's going to have to do quite a lot. We're going to see Celestial Purge, not one we typically see too often, but is a very good sideboard card in the right matchups. Going to get rid of that Magus here, open up our, well, it's just Hall of the Storm Giants, right? And one of our triomes. The rest of it is basics. As a Solitude is drawn for the turn. Very powerful hand here from, right? Flusterstorm, double binding, and Solitude. Brazen Borrower flashed in here. End step. So we're going to go Solitude. In response, we're going to exile that. They're going to gain themselves a little bit of life, go up to 21. Good thing is, well, okay, we just drew an Otawara. That could obviously deal with the Chalice. Kind of
Temporarily,
uncounterable.
so uncounterable, but temporaries are probably not of much use. Maybe instead looking to play the Seasoned Pyromancer to gain some value. Discard the Consider, maybe discard the Otawara too.
Well, I don't
Or
even
the
like,
dress down.
the dress down here might, what's it doing right now? You know what I mean? I'm kind of far behind, but, it
Yeah,
looks like they
well,
went with you.
not much, but it draws a card by itself, so that's something that you could try to cling onto and think that it could provide you with extra value. So cycling it with your Seasoned Pyromancer might be a slight waste, but
So I
yeah,
think
the
maybe
dress
this
down
is
is
like a
not
reason.
doing too much.
I like the Otawara here for potentially for this sort of reason. You know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. If I bounce that back, I get more triggers, turn through my deck a little bit more of the Season Pyro, but they chose to get rid of it. They do decide to draw a Murktide for the turn, though. This is obviously a very good one. Probably going to get a counter spell or a binding. We'll see which option we want to go with. Looks like it could
Probably
be
the
binding.
bind. You would like to save your counter spell for Expressive Iteration or some other powerful non-creature spells. Maybe if Jace shows up, then you would rather counter that. You can just bind the Murktide. It's fine.
Let's have a little look. So you're absolutely bang on the money. Leyline's bound to come down, and we are going to scoop it up. It was, I think that was game 2.
It does seem like
Yep,
game
game
2.
2. So we do have another game getting queued up. We can get the Murktide deck list up on the screen. We can have a little talk through that. Obviously, this is a generic deck list that you can all see here. So we're not particularly. We could look at the deck list. Let's see if I can get that up while Kanister's going to tell you the key cards in this matchup.
Yeah, so the key cards, as we have seen, Chalice of the Void from Blue-White side, certainly a card that can do a lot of damage to the Murktide deck. Between all the one-drop cards it plays, the role that Murktide wants to take in the matchup is to be a slightly controlling, but also slightly delvery deck. You are trying to interrupt Blue-White's card advantage and removal for long enough to throw them off balance with your threats that idly are going to be deployed early and stay in play. So it's a pretty important thing in the matchup. Whoever can get into the driver's seat during the early turns and then ride the rest of the game in their favor is gonna be heavily advantaged over the opponent. So that is what the players are looking to achieve in this matchup. I think cards like Spell Pierce and etc. they might lose value over a longer game. They might not have an opportunity to trade for a card after a certain point, but they do trade for cards very well when it matters the most. So I think you mostly want to be spell piercing, disputing, iterating, plus combine a few extra threats from your sideboard maybe to attack from slightly different angles, as we've seen Seasoned Pyromancer being played in the previous game.
Exactly. So do you think like off that like play draw is more dependent in this matchup than some other in modern? Like being
Certainly,
able to
Blue-White being a Chalice deck too. There's only like a pair of Chalices typically in Blue-White decks, or three. Not like the full four that we are maybe used to seeing in some more all-in decks. But it is a card that just carries a lot of difference inherently to its power level, depending on whether the player casting it is on the play or on the draw. So certainly old Danielakos is going to be really happy to be on the play for game 3.
yeah, you get like some super scary turns where if they manage to get like turn one Ragavan and you don't have an answer. I've been on the blue-white side before where they connect and the first hit of Ragavan flips like a Teferi free and they just get to cast it on turn 2 and you're just like, you know,
That's the more distractive Ragavan that can happen in modern.
but let's see how we're going to go about this. It's obviously one game apiece. Everything to play for. The winner of this, I believe, is going to move to 3-0, give themselves the best possible chance they can have at this moment in time to get themselves to the top 8, which will be being played tomorrow. So make sure you hit the follow button. Make sure you go follow on the Twitters. Make sure you know everything that needs to keep up to date with Mana Trader Series so you don't miss any of the action. Looking at these opening hands here, what have we got? Okay, we've got a mulligan to start off with here into a couple. Well, that's a lot of land. That's a 4 land. So I imagine one of them is going to get pushed back with a Dragon Rage Channel and double bauble. And on the other side, we've got a couple of lands.
What we've
Pretty
seen
awkward though.
like us here, yeah, we've seen just an opening hand that was somewhat keepable, like 2 Mishra's Bubbles and a counter spell. You weren't excited to keep that, but there are matchups where you could keep that. But again, in this matchup, it is very important to have an early threat, and that hand was just way too passive. So I'm not surprised for that. All Danilakos just went to 6 in search of a better one.
And how key is that, do you find, in Magic just in general? Like, you know, do you think people mulligan too aggressively or not aggressively enough? And is that a lack of not knowing the role in the matchup or the format? Does that reward experience? Or is it, you know, sometimes it looks great when you do it and you get like a perfect 6, or sometimes you do it and you just mull yourself into oblivion and, you know, you think you're probably one of the worst players to ever live. How does that like kind of marry up is, you know, a key high level player like yourself?
It's pretty hard to say if people like in general move too much or too little. It's pretty hard to pass the judgment, but it is true that mulliganing is often scary, and it does help to be used to the decisions that your deck presents you with, and it does help a lot to have a lot of experience and be able to uncover the spots where you should keep or mulligan hands that otherwise look attractive or not attractive, and you have to deduce which one lenders, for example, are worth risking it for, and which hands do not make sense. So
I always remember back in the day, like I used to against Dredge when Dredge was one of the bigger decks. Like I always, I've got a really good opening 7 here, but I had no actual hate towards the graveyard. I just thought, well, my opening 7 is good enough. You know, maybe I'll get there, blah blah. And I always think to myself, no, you need to, like the deck's too powerful if I don't have some sort of interaction, and even then, it might not be enough. So
that
I, you know,
depends on your own deck too, right? It
yeah,
depends on
yeah.
what you're playing. Like if your deck truly does not have ways to combat the Dredge's main game plan, then expecting to win because you have a hand that enacts your own game plan well is not gonna cut it for the most part, obviously, right?
And that's another part of Magic, right? People play to not lose than instead of playing to win. So yeah, a lot of different. That's why Magic is really complicated game to play.
For sure.
All right, let's go back to the matchup. So we see a Consider. That's going to pit a. Can't make up the red card. Maybe it's another Ragavan or something into the graveyard, and then we're going to play a Ragavan for the turn. One over on the other side here for the blue-white control player. They decided not to start off with the fetch land and get a blue-white source, potentially a Hallowed Fountain. So they might have a chance of casting this Archmage's Charm on 3. They decided to go with just straight basic planes, which means that the Archmage Charm at best on turn number 4 could be cast. And then again here they decided to play the Flood Strand this turn, so now Hall's going to come into play taps. Like, how important is sequencing your right lands and having the game plan and sticking to it?
Yeah, certainly it's a pretty big cost, but I think they are playing around Blood Moon pretty hard with those decisions. That would be the purpose of that play, wanting to fetch at least 2 islands before Blood Moon presumably drops by. But at the same time, saving the Hall for the late game, that means no Supreme Verdict, no Archmage's Charm on the next turn. So the cost was pretty high unless as Cappuccino draws an extra land, then we might see just another turn of no plays against old Danielakos' hand of counterspell, and that is gonna be a little bit of a dangerous predicament.
See how we move forward. We're going to fetch end of turn. We're going to get ourselves a triumph. It looks like, nope, we are going to crack this as well.
Yeah, so there's also the triumphs, which is also a concern because you are trying to enable leyline binding if you draw it. So that's probably what you're thinking about too. A lot of different directions that you're pulled into between Blood Moon and securing domain.
Okay, we see braids look like they came in. Obviously, an answer for Chalice, and now we're going to get a little bit of a counterspell war. Counterspell the Ragavan, counterspell your counterspell Dragon's Channeler. We're going to put some snaring spell snare into the graveyard. So now we do get to swing across for 3 points of damage and get a trigger off this Ragavan.
Yeah, notably still no delirium despite being relatively late into the game, turn 5. So the channeler is actually missing a land, so that's kind of unfortunate. Land is often one of the easiest types to get into your graveyard, but there is games where you are struggling against that.
So we've got the Archmage's Charm up now. We have the option if you want to try and do it main phase potentially, but there are 2 treasure tokens on the other side, so Counter Magic is still a threat. But we're going to do it in the upkeep. Make them use the mana in their turn if they've got it.
Yeah, we also see just shocking the Hallowed Fountain in just to make sure that you don't get Spell Pierce. The fear of Spell Pierce is
Oh, we went for the Archmage Charm to steal the
yeah.
Dragon Mage Channeler, not to draw any cards, to steal it, and in response we abraded it ourselves. Okay, and we got an express iteration for our troubles for the turn. Okay, cancel. We
Ooh.
got a Teferi free off the top
Yeah,
of our opponent's deck, and we got enough treasures to cast that. That's quite a hard one for them to get off the battlefield, right?
yeah, that's just always so devastating. The fairy time raveler, like it also just happens so often that the fairy time raveler is just so good against the fairy time raveler decks. So it's always such a destructive Ragavan hit. So it might do a lot of work here.
No more dash Ragavans because that Chas did get drawn for the turn and played on 1, but we do have 2 iterations in hand. To see what we find off them. That is another iteration by the looks of it. Off iteration, they do chain pretty well. Murktide's going to go to hand. Snow-covered island to exile. Didn't get a good look at what goes to the bottom, but we just get to pass the turn back. Now we get Solitude drawn for the turn. We're going to play our Kahira. Obviously, Companion. We've seen these do a lot of work in Modern in general.
Ready to take down the Teferi, I guess that's one of the ways.
So Ledger Shredder.
And Legisher are gonna be ready to block Kahira.
Spell Pierce is going to go to the graveyard. Ragavan's going to stay in the hand. Obviously, we know there's a Solitude on the other side, so potentially we could end up getting that Jace off the battlefield. Okay, Counterspell managed to get found, so maybe we're going to be holding that one up. Or not, we're just going to play a Murktide. Probably going to be pretty big. 8/8 is pretty big, in case anyone's new to Magic. An 8/8 fly is pretty good. How do you...
Solitude is pretty good at answering the Murktide Regent, but that still leaves the problem of Murktide Regent
I was about to say, do you think we use the Supreme Verdict here and just try and get ourselves a little 2 for 2, and that is what we went with?
That does seem like that was the choice. It is a little bit of a.
Might start the turn here, drawing a card. We do. What do we find? A Magus of the Moon. That's going to turn off double blue on the other side of the battlefield. Do we have
Yeah,
any
also
more?
turns of double white, which is pretty important, right? Only one plane, so the Solitude is not going to be castable unless by pitching a white card. So honestly, all Danielakos might just spiral this game into a victory. Counterspell up the entire time. The fairy is still in play. Blooded
Just
Shan they draw. Not
just
so
to
good.
rub salt in the wound, getting ourselves it's basically a basic mountain off the top, and our spells do not need red to be cast. So I think we're just going to have to pass the turn back on this one. Only 4 attacks away. Obviously, now we've got Teferi up to 4. We could use Teferi to bounce the Chalice if we want to try and get a hit in with this Ragavan. A lot of interesting options.
Fluster Storm is just useless. Solitude is uncastable. Yeah, this kind of spiraled into a nightmare. It did not look so bad until that one turn when Ragavan hit the Fairy Time Raveler and just flipped the entire game on its head across the span of a few turns, I would say.
I do hear that that is the most powerful one drop in modern. I'm just saying, it's what the kids say. You know, I mean, all the cool kids. All the I don't know how to use the word, but based kids, is that the right word to say it? I don't know. Okay, dress down, draw for turn, and then a Murktide. We're going to get in here. It looks like we're going to connect for 4 points of damage. That's a guarantee. Do we hit anything off the top of our deck or the opponent's deck?
Also, I have a trick question for you, Will.
Oh god.
Does dress down turn off Magus of the Moon?
That's a good question. I guess it does. I would say that then it has no text on it.
Unfortunately, I have no answer to you currently. I remember that there might have been something weird with layers and like the order in which they are applied. So it's
I
possible
think
that
it's with mum, right? When mum's on the battlefield, opponents don't trigger, but like they supersede each other, so you do get to draw a card off the dress down, but you don't get the effect or something along those lines. I think if you pass dress down, that the Evans and Mountain effect does stop. How about a hard cast Leyline Binding into counter magic?
Yeah.
I'm being told that dress down does not stop Magus the Moon. We know nothing. We are both sacked after this round. It was nice run by everybody. Appreciate you all turning up. But we're going to see this Otawara end of turn take out the Chalice, which means that the Dash Ragavan is going to be able to come across for the last points of damage. And that is going to be our last matchup for the round, I think. So welcome back to the virtual booth, Will Hall, Kanister. We are going to give a real short break. I think that might have been the last game of the round. So make sure you stick around for more Mana Trader series action. Speak to you all real soon. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mad Trader series. My name is Will Hall. That's Kanister MTG, and we're bringing you the modern series all weekend long. We got 8 rounds of Swiss today, followed by a cut to top 8, which will be coming to you tomorrow. So make sure you're hitting that follow button to not lose out on that. We're probably going to go straight down to a feature match pretty soon, but like going off that last round that we just saw there, then we've just seen Is It Murktide doing so well this weekend. A lot of the good players in general in Magic kind of just get gravitated towards that deck. There is a modern Pro Tour soon. Do you think we're going to see that high numbers of that deck played?
Well, it's relatively soon, and there is also a pretty big thing happening right before the release of that release. Right before that Pro Tour happens, there is the release of Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle Earth, which is going to be a Universes Beyond set that is going to be legal and modern. I believe
Exactly.
the spoiler season for that starts next week, so that will unravel some of the possible cards that might enter and shake up the modern format from
But
that
where's the
set.
best place
So
to test those cards? Obviously, mana traders. You'll be able to get those cards when they start coming out. If you're a subscriber now, you'll be able to get them earlier than most people, and you'll be able to test these decks, especially to see what's what's going to break the format, what's not. I'm kind of hoping something does mix it up a little bit because I love people brewing, and coming up with those decks. And one thing we have to mention before we go into this game: why are you now standing up, showing off your trophies? Why are you trying to make me feel bad? Like, why are you being a tryhard? I actually labeled my one trophy
you've
here. Look,
got a
see,
trophy too.
yeah, Will's one trophy, Keck W. That's
Yeah.
it, and
Well,
that's for
you can
winning the
display it with
biggest.
pride and
Oh, I do. Anyone walks in, I'm like, I use it as a token sometimes at my FNM. You know, what I mean, like, oh yeah, this is a soldier token or a treasure token. I fully like milk that one achievement that I've got where you've got. Like, I don't even know what they are in the back. None of them look important behind you. You probably just bought them
the,
off,
the, the
second
secret
hand
to
shop or
happiness
something.
is to do with what we've been offered by life. So certainly I'm glad that you're milking the most out of the things you've got.
Well, when you don't have talent, sometimes you've got to milk these things. And as we're going to go down to our feature match, so it looks like we are going to have Burn on the top of your screens there, currently 3-0. And we'll momentarily tell you what they're going to be playing against as we do see what Burn wants to do, a turn one Swift Spear. Instantly pointing out at me in their main deck, Exquisite Firecraft. Don't technically see that one in the main too much these days. It's more of a sideboard card at times.
Certainly, it's a bit of a spicy one, I guess, as far as burn deck building goes. And we do see a mountain pass. So presumably this monastery Swiss Spear is going to meet the end of her fate.
No, I'm calling it now. I reckon it's a Burn Mirror. 100%. Oh, okay. It looks like it's creativity. I was close.
Creativity leading on a mountain, that probably means that the Swiss Spear is dying.
And yeah, it's going to eat a lightning bolt just as you predicted. And then we're going to play our Sacred Foundry tapped at the end turn. That's good for creativity, right? Not seeing multiple one-drop burn spells going to the face on turn 2 and having a nice healthy life total of 19. Now, creativity does play quite a lot of things like Spell Pierce, which could be good in this matchup for them. If they wanted to do that now, though,
Certainly.
they would have to take the 3 points of damage to fetch up a shock land. As Riftbolt comes off the stack, going to go out on a limb.
I'm a fan of creativity in this matchup as long as you get to do like exactly what Mel numbers did in this game so far, which was not take too much damage from the mana base and contain the early creatures. Like when that happens, we see like a pretty comfortable lifestyle of 13, fetching down to 12, getting a Triumph presumably. Then you can play for a bit longer, get to the phase of the game where you can fetch untapped lands for no extra pain in the form of Dwarven Mines, and then eventually you shut the door with life gain from Archon of Cruelty.
So
So I
interesting
don't
turn
hate
there,
that
right?
position.
We went free to the face because we had the is it spectacle cost, so damage was dealt, so we reduced the cost by 2. We decided to go with that instead of using our mana fully and having casting one of these 2-drop spells on our hand. Because if we draw another land next turn, potentially we could double spell, but this way around we now cannot do that. We're limited to 1 spell going forward, at least for the next turn or 2. And on the other side, you see creativity play the Fable the Mirror Breaker, one of the most played cards in Magic right now. Is probably a good way to pick that card. It is extremely good, extremely powerful, does a lot of different things. And now this is the turn where it start being utilized, casting creativity, getting potentially an Archon on the board, which has got the added effect of life gain attached to it. So holding that Spellcrack this turn could be pretty vital, right? But again, life total only at 9 life.
Yeah, it's dwindling, but you can rebuild, and as soon as you just like resolve the creativity, you're gonna be fine. So we see Archon of Cruelty and Teferi Time Raveler discarded immediately. Teferi would be a pretty decent card to cast right here to protect maybe a creativity that will come in the next turn, so that might indicate an extra copy of a Teferi hiding in the hand. Unfortunately, we do not have access to Mel's hand currently, so it remains a mystery as much to us as it is to you, dear viewers. So,
And one on
gonna be waiting.
creativity, it does take a lot of damage from its mana base at times, right? Like, playing these 4 or 5 color decks, it's not free.
Yeah, certainly at times it's pretty dangerous. This is why I said I like the games where you get to fetch your Triumph Stopped, and then you can minimize the amount of damage you're taking from your lands by quite a bit. But of course,
It looks like we're
let's
going to
see how it
creativity for
plays
2
here.
here. Okay, what's the line? Skullcrack in response. Drop them down to 5. No life is gained. I think
Yeah, no life is gained, but it's
we're
pretty
just a
rough
point short,
for
right?
we're actually, yeah, I point short if we're willing to try to top deck a land for Exquisite Firecraft, but if we just keep the Lightning Helix, then that means that we are basically, ooh, okay.
Not
Well,
not enough though, right? It's just leaf on the battlefield.
it's just leave on the battlefield, so I guess that is a problem.
I wonder if that turn where we decided to use one mana instead of 2, if we used Helix there, 3. No, actually, I suppose the double discard just wrecks us. It just creativity did creativity
Yeah,
things.
yeah, there was no good spot to weave in the
Yeah.
skewer the critics otherwise, because the draw afterwards was a Monastery Swift Spear, which actually was like the one of the few draws in the deck that didn't work with top decking a with one of the few top decks that didn't work with the skewer the critics that would have been in the hand had we saved it, because of the Goblin Shaman token being a 2/2 that's capable of blocking the Swift Spear.
All right,
So
we're gonna
getting game
look.
one against Bern is always nice, and we see a few interesting options in the sideboard of the creativity necklace.
Okay, so
Uh,
I'm having a quick look here just at the burn deck list, and they've got 3 uh, overalls that all form in their sideboard. Obviously, key
mm,
card in this matchup if they're able to, utilize casting that in when an Archon comes down. Other than that, there is they've got Rolling Vortex, Smash Smithereens, Chalice, Sanctifier, and more exquisite Firecrafts. I feel like we're just bringing the 3 and 3 in. We don't want to dilute our game plan too much here. Have they got anything crazy in their
Certainly don't
main?
want to dilate your gameplay with Burn too much too often, so it would make sense to stay as close as you can to what your general plan is. That said, Orvar is pretty scary for creativity, especially out of decks that pressure you a lot and they ask you to go for a creativity early in the game. So
It
having
is.
to respect Orvar in a game that just lasts like 4 turns is it's pretty hard, and sometimes you'll just have to walk straight into it. So it's a
So
bit
when
of
you
a
see
scary
there, that's in
proposition.
the opening hand is a rolling vortex. They do have 2 in the main, 2 in the sideboard. So unclear if the ones in the sideboard came in, potentially just the 2 that they normally have, and 3 skull cracks in the main. So that's the only ways they've got to prevent life in the deck. As we're going to see this rolling vortex come down. People, if you're not used to this card, or maybe you're seeing it for the first time, it is a 2-mana enchantment that in each player's upkeep they're going to take 1 point of damage. But the flip side of it, well, not the flip side, the extra part of the text in this card is whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast that spell, it does an extra 5 damage to that player. And then it's also got the pay 1 red. Opponents can't gain life this turn. Quite key when you're a burn deck and you want to, be able to do maximum amount of damage to your opponent and not have them gain any life.
Exactly. It is a way to give yourself that one extra turn of possible top decks to win against creativity when it is about to summon Archons of Cruelty. So that ability is certainly relevant on Rolling Vortex, and besides that, it just stays in play and it does deal damage. The
Yeah.
downside, I guess, the flip side of that is that it does exactly that. It does stay in play and then it does deal damage until it doesn't, because a removal spell takes care of it. So the vulnerability to Leyline Binding is a bit worrisome.
So, and that's what we see is Leyline Binding come down end of turn, untap into Fable the Mirror Breaker. It does make itself the Goblin Shaman token. Pretty expensive token, I believe, in paper. But on the other side, hand stacked full of burn spells. We've got Boris Charm, multiple Skull Cracks, and Lightning Bolt. That is 13 points of damage in the hand. But can we get this down before potentially an Archon or something like that comes down and they start gaining a bit of life? I imagine we can, holding up with multiple Skull Cracks here, but we're just going to go straight to the face with a Boris Charm.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that Aramez is going to end up coming down.
It is interesting because, like, while you do have all that burn and you do have Skullcrack to prevent Archon life gain, you still are vulnerable to the forced discards that Archon brings. So it's not actually all roses. You still have to top deck your way towards victory. And we see Indomitable Creativity and Change the Equation getting discarded, which is actually very interesting. Those are two very powerful cards that you might look to keep in your hand, right? Every Change the Equation is essentially +3 life.
Maybe this
So
is a show of how
that's
good their hand actually is. Oh, we're just passing the turn back.
it's either a show of that or it's a show of really wanting to hit the land number 4, which we have failed to do right now. So what
End
we're
of
gonna see
turn,
here
Skullcrack. Going to eat itself a Spell Pierce.
makes sense to utilize the spell pierce while it's still alive. There might be no more windows this game.
And
Still
that's a Lightning Bolt off the top.
burn. Yeah, that's 9.
Do you like going for it
So
this turn, or do you like going for it in the upkeep? Like obviously, I feel upkeep's the right time to do it, or is the right time to do it in response to them creativity?
it's pretty tricky. You probably don't want to let the Goblin Shaman make it treasure. You don't really want to let them draw an extra card, so you probably go for that in the upkeep, at least Skullcrack, right?
Well, that's what we
You
see that
upkeep.
happened.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. You upkeep the Skullcrack, so it cannot be spell pierced. So once that resolves, you're not as scared of Archons of Cruelty, even if creativity hits 2 of them, because you can respond to their triggers with lightning bolts targeting face. So
Okay, looks like creativity is going to happen here. Obviously, tapping out. So these lightning bolts are kind of free. They would have to sacrifice this token. Oh, what? Sorry,
mm,
what just happened?
that makes plenty of sense. Emrakul the Storm against a deck with 3 Orvars as an alternative threat to creativity into is just it's not bad, right? If your opponent shows you a deck list with 3 Orvars, you might very well want to stray away from the card that risks killing you once it gets onto the battlefield, right? So
Would
I don't
you
hate
say
that.
that
It's actually pretty smart.
is it pretty based? Is that what the term that you'd use for it?
You could say that, yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making
You,
sure.
you
But
could use the term based as a vague positive connotation term just in general whenever something that you think looks good happens.
I'm trying my best to learn from the coolest person I know, Kanister. I'm trying. Okay, you gotta give me some credit for that. But that is going to level it up. So we do get to get a game at 3, but burn will be on the draw here. So that means creativity can come down a turn earlier, or potentially they could hold up more counter magic as they move forward with it. We'll see how they go about sideboarding into this. I don't know. I don't think we've got a burn list that we can put on the screen. So we'll see if we can get a creativity one we can get up on there. Let's get generic. This isn't the exact list that people are playing. Obviously, this is open deck list, so both players do know what they are playing against. They know the exact 75 of their opponent. How important is that in Magic? Sometimes we have closed deck lists, sometimes we have open deck lists. And what side are you on that kind of stuff? Do you prefer them open or closed?
I wouldn't say I have a strong preference, but it does make a difference in how you play. You have to acknowledge that, and it just if it's open decklist, you do have to pay attention to what is exactly in your opponent's decklist and take as much advantage from the information you're being presented as you can, and use it well.
How much does that affect deck building? Because obviously, if it's open deck list, you can play a couple of one-ofs that are good for your deck, but not key, but make your opponent play a bit like potentially if you had like one spell pierce, a critical turns, they
The
have to start
biggest
playing around it.
the biggest yeah, exactly that. The biggest thing that changes when I want to build a deck for an open decklist tournament is that I tend to favor slightly different versions of a similar effect a bit more. So I'm more likely to play a Spell Pierce, a Flusterstorm, and a Mystical Dispute rather than just 3 Spell Pierces. It's
Mm.
small but subtle.
All right, we're
Well,
going to
small and
see
subtle, I guess.
a turn one Swift Spear here. It's going to eat a Lightning Bolt as we pass the turn back. This is kind of doing what Burn wants to do, right? They've got 2 land and a handful of spells. They don't want any more land, really. This is it. Just keep giving them burn spells to the end of days. They do have options here, though, if they want to play the Rolling Vortex or a Goblin Guide into potentially another, one
Mhm.
drop burn spell. What's the advantages of going Goblin Guide here?
Well, if you play your creature earlier, then it's gonna attack your opponent multiple times instead of just a single time if it survives. So the advantage is that it just deals more damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rolling Vortex does a similar thing, so an argument for playing it could be made, but seemingly not what Nick has chosen to go with. Interestingly, we see an Orvar the All form in the hand, despite the fact that May has revealed willingness to board in Emrakul previously in the previous game. The Orvars still stayed in the deck, so probably expecting Emrakul to be one of the multiple creatures, not just a soul creature, alongside alongside a few Archons.
Okay, we're going to see Goblin Guide get turned sideways again. Did a nice job of giving another land to hand. So we know that a Dwarven Mine and a Scoring Tarn is now in hand for our creativity player, but it does eat the Leyline Spine that opens up for this Vortex to come down with 1 red mana open. So potentially Lifelink is stopped if that does happen. And I like
Exactly.
this turn. I like how it's kind of played out. You know what I mean? Like if they go for creativity here, it's kind of risky because Lightning Bolt fizzles it. So does obviously we know there's an over in hand, so they might try and go for it next turn. Do they go for
Yeah, it's
Lightning Bolt end
pretty
of
risky.
turn? No Lightning Bolt end of turn. Mountain is the draw step. And this is kind of what with the big deal about Sunbait Canyon, right? Obviously, again, Modern Horizons 1 card that was printed really helps these decks because they don't want too many lands, and having access to late game, being able to draw more cards, potentially more burn spells, is exactly what they want to be doing.
Yeah, it's a great improvement to the deck. Like, remember
Ooh,
when it used not to do that?
Nature's Claim
Nature's
came in.
Claim.
1 green, destroy target artifact or enchantment. That player gains 4 life. Not really relevant when you're doing huge swings like creativity manages to do, but it manages to get the Rolling Vortex off the battlefield.
It is very nice. Yeah, it's very nice for May to remove that rolling vortex. That means that there is no pressuring permanent on the battlefield, and you just have to deal with the burn spells as they come. And at 11 life, you can take a few and still be okay.
Okay, it looks like we've
Double
got a
swift
double
wheel.
Swift Spear here. Do
It's
you like
gonna
double Swift
be
Spear or
a
holding
good.
up Skullcrack?
Well, it's a bit rough, but I probably at this point I do have to just play my Swift Spears and attack. I don't think I can just win the game if I hold up my spells indefinitely. You do have Orvar in your hand, which also in theory uh, enables you to tap out or tap down more recklessly, and that's kind of the point of playing the card. Although, again, the danger of Emrakul is real, and we have to consider that. So Swift Spears do hit May, so there is no creature interaction available right now. So I wonder what we're gonna see. Might
So
be a
we're going to
an
combat.
attack with the dwarf. Maybe fetch another dwarven mine and create Emrakul.
It's the
That's a
second Dwarven
line
Mine.
that would make sense from this position.
And we can do this with Spell Pierce backup if we've got it. Okay,
Ooh,
we're going to
transmogrify.
transmogrify. Normally a one of in these decks. It's kind of the pseudo 5th one. And I quite like this. The Lightning Bolt's going to eat the counter spell, which we see here. So that's going to counter Lightning Bolt. Now, is this going to
Let's
be
see
Emrakul?
if it's just Emrakul.
It
Yeah,
is straight up into
20,
Emrakul.
27 cards revealed. It is likely to be just a single Emrakul on the deck now.
Okay, Sunbait Canyon drawn for the turn. I don't think we have a way to win here. I think it's too much. 3 damage from Skullcrack's only going to drop them to 5. Both creatures attacking, just going to get chumped. I think that's it. I think, just going to this Emrakul sideboard plan, not even rolling the dice, just straight up taking 4 cards out, bringing 1 Emrakul in as your threat.
It
You've
seems
got
like, yeah.
waste.
Especially like it's essentially Orvar is showing his like despite the power of the card and how devastating it can be, it is showing Orvar's weakness, especially in an open decklist
Hmm.
environment. There are reasons to be incentivized to play an Emrakul in your deck anyways. Those being cards like Necromancia that occasionally pop up or some mill decks that you might play against. But Emrakul also serves a good role in games like this. Just blanking the Orvar is pretty impressive.
And,
And again,
being at
small
15
spike
life.
ability, a great deck. Yeah, very convenient. 15 life exactly. They
I
managed
think
to
that
take enough damage from the mana base to end the dwarves to exactly die to the Emrakul just barely.
just to rub salt in the wound, we're going to do Spell Pierce here and get rid of that. I think we are just a combat step away from the end of this game. And the creativity, imagine take it down. And there it is. Annihilate. Get rid of everything. No, we're scooping it up. So, congratulations to them. Obviously, one of the most played decks this weekend alongside Rhinos. Pretty good one-sided game. Like Burn had its chances, right? If they just drew a little bit better, and that I think the big brain play in that matchup was the sideboarding, taking out the Archons, bringing in that Emrakul, almost won the game straight up. If that was an Archon, we obviously had the Orvos in hand to kind of deal with it and getting a trigger back, potentially also having a combat stat with it. So, congratulations to them, pretty big. And we do have a backup feature match for you all. Bench Summer, we've spoke about him before, very prominent Death Shadow player in the MTGO community, very good player in paper as well. And they are against AFX, and we think they're on Rakdos mid-range. Going into game number 3 here, starting off with a Dragon Rage Channeler. We're going to see if we can get those hands on the screen for you all. There we go. Thank you very much, Adrian. Shout out Adrian, working in the back, doing all this coverage for you all. Me and Cash are just up front, taking all the credit for it. It's basically how it works, just so everyone's aware. If you're not into content creation, you get someone else to do all the hard work and you just put, some interesting faces in front of it and they get the credit. It's great. But no, big shout out to him.
Well, yeah.
As we see, okay, we're respecting this quite a bit. Normally, you'd think, oh, I'm 2 for 1 and just to get a Dragon Rage off the battlefield, not great. But this is going to be a Rakdos scam list, which is kind of different to what we've seen before. We're going to cheat it back, and it gets a +1/+1 counter, so it gets to dodge lightning bolts on the other side of the battlefield. And we got obviously
Yeah.
perfect knowledge. We see a fatal push in hand. Doesn't do too
You
much
see
when it
that
costs 5 power.
Ben Summer just has no answer to the Fury currently, so they're just gonna attack twice for 18 damage,
Let's
16 damage,
see what
and
he's got in the list.
might just be it, I guess, depending on how the game breaks down. Not
S-
many great plays. You could see like Traverse for Swarm, the double stomping ground looking really unappealing here.
Well, I'm literally looking at Bench Summer's list, and this has got some spicy stuff in it. So to start off, what answers does he have for Fury? It looks like we've got 2 Terminates in the main, and in the sideboard, there isn't anything in the
Unholy
sideboard.
Heat.
So we've got 2 Unholy Heats in the main and 2 Terminates. That's the 2 cards that can get that off the battlefield. In the sideboard, we've got Team of Battle Rage in the sideboard, so I'd love to see that. But we've
Mhm.
also got Tend the Pests in the main. Do you know what that one does off the top of your head?
That's a tough one. Let me
Sh-
say. Let me see. 10 the best.
Strixhaven.
Is that a card with the mechanic Learn?
No.
10 the pests. Is that the card that says sacrifice a creature and then create this many pests where X is its power?
You are too good at magic, sir. That's exactly what he does. Obviously, pretty good when you've got 1 mana, 6/6s, 7/7s, 10/10s, etc., being able to sacrifice them, and the added little ability of, those little what pests that we make do end up gaining life if that becomes relevant. And as we spoke about earlier with the Traverse trying to get it, he does have a Gore Clan Rampager in the main that he can traverse up if needs be. But he is going to be,
what would you say about this Goklan Rampage?
yeah,
How would you like refer to it?
in
How
so
would you comment it?
I'm just going to move on.
I was trying to set you into a possibility of using the new term you just learned today, and you could say that it's based.
Oh, it's
Uh,
based. Oh man, like you set me up and everything, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. That is how much of a boomer I am, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, I was trying
Um,
to help. I was not trying to fool you.
look, it's yeah. There's a reason why that people say that they absolutely believe that you are the one person that had the most impact and importance in Magic history, and that you cleared the path to save Magic during the pandemic, and that you are a huge number of content creator folks would not be here without you. That is exactly why, and you proved it on this stream. So thank you very much. Back to the
That's
game.
we
How can we get a Fury
see
off the
Ben
battlefield?
Summer fetching a basic swamp and passing the turn.
Well, they don't have the traverse, right? So they can only get a basic with that traverse. They don't have another land in hand, so they are kind of limited to playing this swamp. If they do get hit for 8 damage here, though, they will drop them down to 9, so they can play Death Shadow as a 4/4 if they want to go that route. They do have Stomping Ground, so they can potentially shock themselves a little bit more to make it bigger, so it would trade with this Fury. We obviously know how perfect information. We know that there is a Fatal Push and Terminate on the other side of the battlefield, and a Shield Dread popping up in Modern. Interesting
Yeah,
4-drop
this is
to
interesting
see here.
because shouldered like this is modern is the one format where shouldered actually has been terrible and fairly unplayable. She's been showing up in basically everywhere else, vintage, legacy, uh, pioneer, standard, but modern has been like the one place where it's a pretty rare card to see and not too often that it is played.
I mean? Especially in a Rakdos deck, there's no ways to get it out. It doesn't have any more effects once it's hit the battlefield. It just does what it does. Wherein you
Yeah,
sometimes see it in Yawgmoth. At least in Yawgmoth, when you're drawing cards, you can keep gaining life to keep drawing more cards, etc. So it has like a
it
a
serves as
natural,
sort of a combo piece, yeah.
yeah.
While
But
and Riders just played straight up, which is pretty surprising to see, but I guess it's not very close to being castable this game, and it probably is not gonna end up mattering. But it's not interesting to see nonetheless. That being said, it does seem like Bench Summer will need to charm block on the next turn, and a fail push is going to take care of the Death Shadow, and we might see a Terminate on the Dragon Rage's channeler. We might also not see one. It does make sense to terminate the Shadow attack for lethal with Fury, force one charm block, and wait for the other Dragon Rage's channeler to attack, clearing the way for the Fury to deal lethal damage on your
and
next turn. So
this +1/+1 counter coming down absolutely, perfect in this scenario. Being able to dodge lightning bolts, huge.
certainly that happens very often.
And as
For Fury,
the play that you said, obviously we've got a fatal push in hand. We don't need to deploy that now because Delirium is on, and the Dragon Age Shiner does have to attack. We've got a nice healthy life total of 19. We're going to see Lightning Bolt come across. Is this
to try to
upkeep?
find an answer to the Fury.
I don't hate lightning bolting the Fury here because then that gives me options of another lightning bolt. Potentially, we could also draw the
Mhm.
Tarfire. But Bench Summer is definitely a better Death Shadow player than me. He knows what he's digging for. He knows what's in his deck and what is not.
Yeah, certainly that's an interesting question. Like, I think I would lean towards bolting the Fury in this spot, but certainly the extra damage might matter if you kill the Fury and then turn the game into a race. So it's a pretty tricky question
I
as
think
to
that's
what you
game,
target.
right? We put the land in the graveyard and we draw another Blood Crypt for the turn, and we're just going to fatal push our own. Okay, no, we can target this Fury. It just doesn't work, right?
Yeah, it's just too heavy to be pushed, I guess.
I wonder if that's what we could have gone with. I don't know. It's not going to make much of a difference. I'm pretty sure we've got perfect knowledge, and this is going to be this game wrapped up. Bractos Scam is going to be able to take it down and advance himself to a nice 4-0 finish in this tournament.
Let's wait for a few seconds because we might see shoulder being dropped into play. No, we don't.
No land. You don't get that sort of finish. We're just going to come across with the 4-4 double striker. Very big in Magic. Congratulations to AFX taking it down. Remember, this is a 8-round tournament, so lots of Magic to be had. Welcome back to the virtual booth. My name is Will Hall. That is Kanister MTG, and we are bringing you all the action this weekend. Obviously, normally it's Corey and Ross, but they're having a month off, so they're going to be letting us other people have a chance. Kind of commentating on this beautiful format, which is modern, and we are playing Magic. We're going to try and sort out a backup feature match for you all. So in that sort of the 10 seconds we've got until do that, we've been trying all weekend, and it's really cringe, but I don't care. We're trying to do it. And now there's a cat on the screen. So now everyone's going to start spamming cat on in the chat, as well as the Kanister motes. But I'm setting out for it. I want this virtual high five. We haven't hit it yet. Ready? 3, 2, 1. We absolutely suck at this. There's probably a delay or something in. We'll get one by the end of the weekend, chat. So make sure you stick around to see that.
It was good. It was good. It was good. It was fine. It was like a great high five, and I think
It was. What maybe in our heads it was. Maybe chat might be a bit more brutal on us because chat. Well, let's be honest. Chat know and see everything when they go about this. But we are looking to get you a backup feature match. Looks like we have found one. So Adrian's going to load that up in the background for us all. Nope, we're going to jump straight into it. This looks like creativity versus. Well, I don't know what.
Seems like a Omnath deck.
Yeah.
Of sorts.
This is going to be showing the new Nissa that we spoke about at the start of the weekend, and how powerful that could potentially be in these matchups, where it can tutor up elementals if needed. Looks like we do have a
more importantly, we see an Elishnorn in play, which is a pretty new technology and creativity, and it is a pretty funny one. I think it is actually pretty cool. First, it's a card that costs just 5 mana, so you can play her.
Oh my words!
Both sides of Elishnorn. All right, not many triggers are gonna be happening now, but first you can play your Elishnorn for 5 mana, so it's just perfectly hard castable from your hand if you happen to have drawn it. And secondly, it is yet another way to fight against Orvar or against the mirror matches, but like it is nice against Orvar, right? You just make it so that your opponent's Archons do not trigger when they come into play, while yours trigger doubly so. So having a single Elishnorn in your deck makes it just perfect if you happen to be able to creativity with X2. But yeah, Garthana just easily winning from this position with a Ren emblem, not a big surprise.
Well, being able to cast more creativities, and that the mode that we don't see too often, but is on creativities, you could target their creatures, their artifacts with it. Spin the wheel on their side. Because two mums just looking at each other, you're like, well, what are we going to do? How do we get past this? But a Ren Ultimate is definitely up there with one of the things that can kind of edge you over and win that matchup, as we've seen there. Super powerful. Modern Horizons 1 card, reprinted a couple of times since. Still holds its value, still super powerful. Who would have thought 2 mana planeswalkers that don't die to lightning bolt the turn they come down is good in Magic? I personally like the card. Obviously, some people really don't like it. Probably the people that lose to it or play against it. Definitely Taxes definitely don't like that card. Let's put it that way. Adrian, do we have a backup feature match? Okay, looks like we're gonna. Ooh, okay. So Brad did pick up his second loss of the weekend, dropping into 2-2, giving another $50 to some lucky opponent. Obviously, this costs. It comes out of his wage. I heard that he actually has to pay out of his own pocket every $50 he loses. So he's not intentionally throwing games, but he is 2-2. I don't know what the record you're going to need to top 8 this weekend is. I'm guessing it's an X1-1 is a lock. Maybe an X and 2 will get in, but that's like. I'll let you kind of work that math out, Kanister, if that's a thing that you're into. Are you good at predicting like top 8s and what records you need, or do you just keep playing until you're getting them?
I'm actually, my approach when I play tournaments is that I just sit down, I play rounds, and I mostly sit down and I stop playing when they tell me to stop playing.
Or when you have a Mox Vintage tournament to go to.
Yeah, I guess that's when they tell me to play more, then I guess I stop playing to play more. That's another option.
Okay, well,
But
that's what everyone's going to be doing this weekend anyway, because it's not just the top 8 that are going to be winning prizes this weekend. Top 32 will be getting some sort of money, if that's within credit, with mana traders, or actual cold hard cash. And if you're a subscriber, you get a 10 times bonus on your winnings. So, it pays to be subscribed. There's multiple codes floating around. I think Bash Pros is the one you can use here to get 15% off. So if you're thinking about, getting a mana traders account, start playing some Moto, up in your game, maybe you're moving across from casual formats, so you want to be more competitive and you want to practice them. One of the best ways to do it is with MTGO, and with having a mana traders account gives you access to multiple different decks. Whereas in paper, you got to buy every deck, and every card can be pretty hard at times. You might think, oh, this card's really good, spend X amount of money on it, then you test it and it's not very good. Well, don't worry. On Mana Traders, you can just rent the card. If it's not good, you send it back, you go get yourself another one until you get the exact 75 that you want for your up and coming tournaments. And it doesn't matter what format either. That's the good thing about these tournaments, right? And just playing online, let's be honest, you're one of the best, if not the best, at streaming, playing on Modo, solely on Modo. We do not see Arena on your content. You are either playing in
sparingly.
exactly, and I think that's what draws us to you. That and the awesome music that you always have on your stream. It's a delight to listen to at times. And we're moving in. We do have a backup feature match, and it is with one of my favorite decks in the format, Yawgmoth combo at the top of your deck. So I'll be able to cover that one. But it does look like it's going to be against Rakdos, either mid-range or Scam, and they do have an unlicensed Hurst in play. And this can make things very hard, especially depending on how the Yawgmoth player is sideboarded, if they do have an actual way to get that off the battlefield.
Yeah, it could be a bit tricky, but at the same time, we do see Greece already on the battlefield and untapping once again. So making insects with Greece is also a pretty good plan and a good way to win the game. So we might just see that be the approach to the game.
But I've won more games with Yawgmoth, I think, via Strangleroot beatdowns than I have with just straight up comboing off. But I do find
I
that
believe you.
Rakdos decks are fun, or pretty hard to go against, because they have the card Fury in them. And if you look at the battlefield right now, that's 4 toughness on our 4 creatures. So it kind of does a lot of work for you, especially if it gets scammed. Right now, it would probably clean up the whole battlefield as well as that Grist. So it's
Certainly, that's one of the dangers, and that's the reason why the matchup is so rough. Other of the reasons being Doffy Voidwalker, but if Lucas G1GG's deck is of the mid-range variety, that means that there is no danger of getting tricked by Feign Death or Undying Malice, and that ups Yawgmoth's chances to take down the game considerably.
So let's see how they want to go about this. We are just going to come across for 3 points of damage. This is the beatdown plan that I said about. We do have a noble hierarch on the battlefield, so maybe we didn't have to attack with the pest token, but we're playing around removal here. We're going to come across for 3 points, drop down to 16, and I guess we're just going to pass the turn back. We do have the Blood Artist on the battlefield, so it does kind of help us if there is kind of a Fury effect going on. And this is kind of why I wouldn't like to tap out all my creatures if I can help it, is because I want to hold up potentially things like Cord at instant speed. Because if they use the unlicensed Hurst, and then in response I can Cord and then potentially combo off that way, because we're not far off being able to do that. Or if we can get their life total low enough, just a Yarg on the battlefield, sack everything, and have Blood Artist as the last card we sack to get the last points of damage across that way. Lots of different ways to attack for it. And we haven't spoke about how good Grist can actually be, right? On every stack, it's an insect. Besides in play, it's a planeswalker. So very hard to, not in this matchup, but counter magic, things like negate effects, force negation don't actually stop
Spell Pierce.
Grist. Spell Pierce, yeah, huge.
Yeah.
But then when it's on the
Grease is
battlefield,
excellent. Grease is just like an excellent card for this deck. Yawgmoth used to be a strategy for Modern Horizons 2, I believe, but it was very fringe and not very powerful. It had many anemic draws, but ever since Grease, it just got so much better because that card alone is a great plan in itself. Many decks in Modern actually kind of struggle with a Planeswalker, and just giving a constant source of creatures to utilize with your Chord of Callings, as you said, etc. While also serving as a removal spell, which is just a very good effect, and it's all that Yawgmoth ever wants. So
And speaking of Yawgmoth, straight off the top, we actually managed to find it. I do like. I was about to say, how do we start off this turn? I do like starting off with a Grist here, potentially get an extra creature on
makes
the
sense,
battlefield
yeah.
because you want them. One thing Yawgmoth does is it refills your hand when it hits the battlefield. One of the added effects to this card and how good it can be. I have a feeling there might be some double queuing going on. Looking at the clocks, one person's got 15 minutes, the other person's in their last 5. Fatal Push hits the graveyard, and the namesake card of the deck comes down. Oh, not found this art, but here we are. Yawgmoth comes down. Remember, this is the 2/4 human, has protection from humans, legendary creature, pay 1, sacrifice up to 1, sacrifice creature up to 1, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, and then you get to draw a card. And then it's got the pay 2, discard a card, proliferate as well, which can come up in these sort of beat down plans that we're seeing happen on the screen right now.
Well, I have a question.
Go for it.
You said you are a fan of the Yawgmoth deck and you play it occasionally. Do you
It's
have
my
any
go-to deck.
funny stories connected to the card's protection from humans' ability? Did it ever come up in unexpected situations?
I have had
Or
people playing Asmo trying to get Yawgmoth to do damage to itself, and it has protection from it. Also, what's the other? Oh, against Burn. There's a lot of the 1-mana creatures in Burn tend to be humans, so you get to block
Swift
quite a
Swift.
lot. Yeah, and you're just like, yeah, throw that under chump block that. But it is going to eat a Terminate here, which does trigger the Blood Artist. But then on top of it, another 4 damage is going to come across. I might have been inclined there to sacrifice one of the fresh infect. Wrong, not infect. God, I wish it made infect tokens. The insect token there to get another card deeper. But I suppose the strategy we're going for right now is go wide. Like it's unless they've got
Yeah.
Furies, which they haven't played in the last turn, this go wide strategy is going to get us there. They're only at 11 life. We've got another 5 power on the battlefield. If all our creatures die, then they're going to take a lot more. The fetch stone's going to drop them down to 10. We're going to have something pretty impressive from the scams, or if it is a scam side, should we say, of how they're going to go about this. We've got maybe a Fable. No, Season Pyro is good. It's going to put a board up for us.
Well, the one problem with Seasoned Pyromancer is that you can create tokens to block and trade for the insects, but the
Just
Blood Artist is still there, so you're still taking the damage. You're not actually even saving life that way. And we still see that there is an Eldritch Evolution in hand, ready to transform the Strangleroot guys into yet another Yawgmoth if
I
that
think
is
that might
what
be
you'd like
game.
to go
Oh
after.
no, I spoke too soon when I say might be game. This Grist is huge. Yeah, it's going to, one of these effects is going to trigger. The Grist is going to die, but they get to take the Eldritch Evolution out of the hand, which is key. Yep, they do manage to take that one.
And
Drop
trigger
them
Blood
down to
Artist.
7.
That's pretty funny, actually.
I'm trying to think. This might be lethal. So if we
Let
go,
me see. 1, 2,
well,
3.
another endurance might also make that. So you go tick down Grist, sacrifice a creature, kill a creature, 2 triggers. You play the other Grist, tick down creature, kill another creature, 2 more triggers. That drops them down to 3. You can then attack. They block, go down to 2. No, maybe we haven't got lethal just off, I think.
What
But
if
then we also
you minus Grist sacrificing the Ignoble Hierarch, killing the Seasoned Pyromancer? That's 2 triggers. Then you attack with everyone. That is
1,
2
2, 3.
damage and 2 triggers at least.
We can also remember we
And
can
then
evoke
you
this.
can evoke an Endurance for 1 extra life loss. So it seems
That's the
like
hidden bit that people don't.
you can find lethal lines here. Yeah.
I feel like there is a line. We're just trying to work out what it could be, because endurance, obviously, say we can convoke it, gets to trigger itself, which is
There's
kind of the key parts
also
of it.
There's also an option to accrue unlicensed hairs in response to Seasoned by a monster being targeted by Grist's -2 ability, which does it change stuff considerably? No, I don't think so. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3,
We're just
4.
going to combat. Well, yeah, we're just going to go this route, see what damage gets across. There's no point showing what we're going to do with our grist. They don't know. Well, they do know about the second one in hand, and they know about the endurance.
I mean, it's probably lethal still, right?
So this is going to trigger
One
6. Oh
damage.
yeah, this is trigger 5 times, right? And then we've got double
Yeah.
grist plus endurance. Yeah. This is going to be lethal. One
Yeah,
damage comes across. 5 blood artist triggers plus tick down grist. Sacrifice this last this last token. Kill the young pyro, and that is going to be
So
game.
it seems like the secret line to win was just to attack with everyone while we were
We're
striving to.
overthinking it. We're overthinking it. You see,
Yes.
that's our job. As commentators, look at every aspect and see if we can get those style point wins. Turns out you just have to turn things sideways. Math is for blockers, And Blood Artist showing what he could do and leave left unchecked. Managed to take that game down. They had the game plan: go wide. Okay, there's no Fury. That one time they went for it. They gave them the option. If there's a Fury, we're probably looking at a different outcome to that game. Didn't have it. Went with it. Ticked up grist continuously. Kept making 1-1s. Went wide. Got their GGs to them. But that is going to be the last game of this round. So we're going to have a short break and we will be back shortly. So make sure you stick around for more. What round are we in? Number 4. So we're going to be back round number 5 of Modern Action. And we'll see you all really shortly. See you all soon. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So quick change to the schedule. You do not have 30 seconds until we go live. We're going to jump straight into this. One of the games was finishing late. And they've gone into a game 3. So this is the last game of the round. And we thought instead of going live and waffling or keeping you all waiting, we're going to go straight into this to give you more magic. It's what we're all here for, right? We just want to see more magic. We're going to try and get the decks up on the screen and see who's playing what. Ooh, D&T's just been said on my ear. A bit of Death and Taxes. When was the last time we saw Death and
a deck name I
Taxes?
have
In
not heard in a while, yeah.
2023 Death and Taxes. Who is the hero that we need to out here? Is it Aldo 80? What hero? And they're playing against Lit Plays, but we don't know exactly what they're on. We're going to see if we can get that for you all. Domain Zoo. Okay, we couldn't have written this up better.
What a battle.
This is a battle. Do we have wild Nakatos? That's what I need to know. I want to see. Yes. Wild Nakatos are in this. Apparently, I'm getting it said in my ear by Adrian. Okay, Kanister. I'm going to teleport you back to 2015 when this was an actual match. Who was normally favored in this match?
Bro, I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay.
In today's Magic, pretty
Wild
hard.
Let's go.
Let's go, Wild Nakato. I would guess that the larger size of the domain zoo creatures is going to be pretty favorable in this game. In this matchup, right? Like Wild Nakato being a 3/3 versus Leonin Arbiter being just a measly 2/2. Although, of course, if there are any fetch lands, that could be an issue for Lit Plays. So we'll see where they go. No land to follow up the Tribal Flames. So no planes for Wild Nakatal. And this is what D&T likes to prey on players who missed land drops and then get extremely punished by the combination of Thalia and Leonin Arbiter. The Field of Ruin is already looking scary.
And we actually have 2 Arbiters in the hand and 2 Thalias. So lots of option there. Obviously, Field of Ruin as well. If we get to untap with it, potentially we could see a land go missing for our Domain Zoo player. And this is sort of magic I love, right? Like, I don't mind who wins this matchup. They're both heroes to me. And just on time. Oh, no. That's not how it works on Magic Online. You need to click on Arbiter and then pay the 2 before you fetch. It's not fetch, and then it tells you to pay the 2. Oh, no.
Yeah. It's pretty tricky because Leonin's Arbiter ability is a pretty uncommon type of an ability in the game. I believe like there's probably no other card that really, no other playable card at least that works similarly. It just gives you a static chance to pay a cost that you can pay to ignore its ability towards the end of the turn, but it is not a triggered ability. It does not go on the stack. It does not go through the stack. It just happens. If you are unfamiliar with that, which I believe the newest generations of players that did not grow up being bullied by Learning Arbiter day and night are not too familiar with that, it's pretty easy to actually fall victim of the sneakiness of that ability.
Well, you hate to see it, and you only ever make that mistake once. But as I said, it is quite a tricky interaction that you don't see very often. But we do get start deploying a few more threats now. So one we don't generally see. I forgot the name of it. Is it something brewing or brewskin? Let me see if I can find the deck list for you all. But I know it's got domain for its power, and then 3 for its toughness, and has trample. So a lot of
Bishop Brawler.
thank you. A lot of abilities on a 2-drop creature, and we
One
are now going to take away a lot of
extremely
that.
funny part of this entire setup is that TNT destroying Domain Zoo's lands actually takes away the one advantage that Domain Zoo has, which is the better sizing on their creatures, right?
Hmm.
Because once you kill their lands, they actually become, Nakata is just a 2/2 or even a 1/1. Nishua Brawler is going to literally have 0 points of power if you kill enough lands, which I find to be pretty humorous, a pretty unconventional way to attack Domain Zoo, if I might say.
And we're seeing the power of Arbiter here, right? Like all these fetch lands, meaning that 2 mana is going to have to be used to get them on the battlefield. Now we've got a nice turn, and we can get Thalia down, turning off potentially future lightning bolts. We know there's 2 tribal flames in the graveyard, which is one of the best sources of reach. Enough that we're even be able to get a bit frisky here with this Arbiter and turn that sideways for 2 points of damage.
Also, notably, Thalia, a legendary creature, so it does cheapen a Ganjo Seat of the Empire, so that could be used to stop the Nishova Brawler. Another wooded foothills.
And
Ay,
it's
ay,
got
ay.
first strike. Maybe it's going to really cost them that turn. They had the option, and the kind of misclick, which is MTGO is formidable for it, right? It doesn't take any hostages. We've all been there, had the odd misclick, think we know how things work, and it doesn't work that way. And here comes a Giver of Runes, powerful 1-drop from Modern Horizons. Oh, we're getting in. We're getting in there.
Yeah, that's
Is
an
there
attack
a?
backed by a Ganjo.
Do we double block here? Is it that important? Or that this is where I say it's open deck list. We know about a Ganjo. This sort of block doesn't do great, but if we double blocked, at least we get the Arbor off the battlefield, opens up our
Hey,
fetch lands. We can play a bit more of basically magic.
it was actually a very risky attack. If you double block with Nakatal and Nishova Brawler, then you get to trade for the Arbiter, free your lands, and suddenly your hand is actual spells instead of just blank cards that carry no relevance on the game. So a pretty risky attack, but did not come to
Yeah,
that. There was no double block happening in the end. So
Charming Prince drawn for the turn. Obviously, that's got the ability to flicker, scry, or gain life, depending on what is needed. Both players' clocks are getting pretty low here as well. So, that is another factor we don't genuinely have normally in Magic. Normally, you just go, you can go to a draw, whatever. You cannot draw an MTGO, at least it's extremely hard to do it. So, it is an added factor for all the players playing this weekend. Make sure the clock and utilize it to their ability. We're going to use Prince Charming for the Scry 2. And
I have to say, Prince Charming, right? Like we as you mentioned at the beginning of this game that we do live in the year 2023 now, and it is odd to see Death and Taxes be played in general. It's a pretty uncommon archetype nowadays. But what baffles me even more is that while like the old all stars like Leonin Arbiter and Thalia, they still show up, and it does make sense to play them in this context. What does baffle me is that one of the newest cards to show up in the deck is Charming Prince, because that card on its surface does not strike me as an extremely powerful effect.
I'm going to guess we got things like Flicker Wisps and that's type of effect in here. Let's have a little look so I can get the deck list up. What have we got that can flicker? We've got Esper Sentinels, Stoneforge Mystics. A good one with Stoneforge Mystic, being able to flicker that and get yourself another equipment. extraction specialists. We've got them in the deck. We've got
Oh, that's a
Skyclaver
nice combo.
apparitions.
All right, extraction specialist combo is actually pretty exciting. You get to return all of your charming princes with any extraction specialist, I guess, specifically, as you get to chain them over and over. So that's a pretty enticing combination.
Let's see what else. But
We
okay,
see
we've got
let's
a bit of
play
magic being played
fetching,
now. Our life total is low, but we're back in it.
fetching down to 4 life against 4 creatures with 2 monsters.
Well, we can just give 1 pro green attack, right?
Yeah, that's an option.
Okay.
Doesn't even choose to go for that though.
This is
Could have also used a Ghost Quarter to maybe cut off a color. Cut off blue
what
or
could we
cut
cut
off
off? We could
green.
cut green off, right? Green or blue.
Yeah. Green seems pretty okay, right?
Yeah, I
There's
think
maybe
that's the one I would have tried to gone for
actually
there.
actually cut off green and black. So interestingly, also make Territorial Arcavu smaller. This way you make it into a 3/3. But now it is
Oof, a big
too late, and that
Draco.
does let Sign of Draco being cast.
And
So
that gives us lots of options here, right? And now things start getting different abilities depending on what color mana they are. And okay, we're going in with both. This smells to me we might have
very
more tribal flames in hand.
very aggressive attack. Tribal Flames would be a good one, except that it does cost 3 mana with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben in play, so it's a little bit dangerous.
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. We cycle away a Dramoka's command. Haven't seen that one in a hot second.
Yeah, that's. It has its spots. It has its spots. Dromoka's command can actually line up decently against Urza's Saga's deck. Sometimes you can get a 2-for-1, destroy their land, make them sacrifice their Saga, and fight with something, for example. So it's not too bad in that role.
So if this happens, I imagine Ghost Quarter will take out 2 land. No, okay, it's not going to do any of it. We're just going to get across, drop them down to 6.
Thalia died in combat, interestingly,
Lightning
and
bolt.
Lightning Bolt finishes the job.
So wow, I don't even know what to say. That looked like it was going to
Yeah,
be an absolute landslide one side, and all of a sudden we just pulled it out of nowhere, and we managed to get there. So yeah, congratulations to our Domain Zoo player. Like,
yeah.
talk about
Let's
calling
play.
games too early. It always comes out and catches you. But welcome back to the booth, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Will Hall. That is Kanister MTG. We are bringing you all the modern action, and that is the last game of this round. Adrian, are we going to go straight to the next round, or? Okay, we got about a minute until parents go up, so we will talk through a couple of bits that we need to talk about. I spoke about the prizes a lot this weekend, but there is